Chapter 74. The darkness of the dark caverns was never calm. Because most of the areas here had only been roughly surveyed, even the indigenous races who lived in the underground world all year round did not have a completely reliable map. The underground tunnels often stretched for miles, sometimes expanding to thousands of feet wide, and sometimes shrinking so narrow that even a caveman could not squeeze through. The largest cavern hall was like a miniature version of the surface, with hills, valleys, underground rivers, and lakes. In this three-dimensional environment, most races could use the ceiling and walls of the cavern to travel freely, using natural or magical flying, levitating, or wall-walking mounts, such as giant spiders and certain types of lizards. As the only city built in the underground world by exiled sorcerers, the location of Elysium was extremely secretive. The rock layer full of special metal composition could isolate the outside world from malicious probes. Coupled with the dark creatures, puppet creatures, and subterranean aborigines that were widely spread in the dark caverns and tunnels, it was extremely difficult for outsiders to find the only way to Elysium through the countless winding tunnels without the guidance of the residents of Elysium. Some people said that the powerful fallen sorcerer of Elysium had set up a huge illusion spell formation outside the city, which could erase all traces of Elysium's existence from the deepest parts of the tunnels. This way, even if an enemy really broke into this place, they would not be able to find Elysium even if they walked through all the underground tunnels. Elysium, Cat's Ear Tavern. As the huge firestones hanging high above the cavern began to extinguish, night fell in the underground world. For the fallen sorcerers living underground, without a clear distinction between day and night, without a reference to the passage of time, their lives would become muddled, and it would be difficult to organize everything. So, continuing some of the habits of the surface, the powerful and resourceful sorcerers harvested a large number of firestones from the depths of the earth, and then used a spell formation to control the firestones to light up and extinguish according to the time pattern on the surface. Using this method, Elysium City was able to gather a large number of desperate sorcerer apprentices, making them become the first batch of residents here with unswerving loyalty. When night fell, the streets and alleys of Elysium were lit with torches and bonfires, and the entrance of the Cat's Ear Tavern was lit with dim butter lamps. Pushing open the old, dirty half-door, Langdon entered the tavern with a grim expression. As soon as he entered, he frowned at the bustling noise. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening in Elysium City, but the tavern was already crowded with all kinds of drunkards. As far as the eye could see, there were 1 or 2 representatives of all the famous races in the underworld. Of course, this was only limited to the lower levels. The residents of Blissful City were definitely not lowly creatures like the clawed terror or petrified lizard. Most of them were demi-humans or intelligent races with human-like appearances. For example, lizardmen, gnolls, underground gnomes, spirit catcher, ratmen looking at a group of large rats that looked like walking upright in front of him, looking at their furry, ugly faces, Langdon felt sick to his heart. After all, he was a pure human. Ordinary humans could not survive in Elysium, but Langdon was fearless. He even kicked the ratfolk blocking his way. And the reason he could do all this was because he was a sorcerer apprentice, a quasi-sorcerer. In Elysium City, aside from the sorcerers who rarely showed their faces, a quasi-sorcerer apprentice like him was the top figure in the city. Wherever he went, countless natives of the underworld would take the initiative to make way for him. His light blue apprentice robe was embroidered with mysterious golden runes. As he walked, the rune energy glowed, adding a touch of fantasy and mystery to him. His handsome figure and elegant demeanor all gave Langdon a completely different noble temperament. Unfortunately, the once elegant Langdon's face was so gloomy that ink could almost be squeezed out. Kicking away the ratfolk blocking his way, Langdon ignored their strange squeaks of protest. He strode to the counter, slammed the thick countertop, and roared, "Give me a bottle of Liehua." The noisy and bustling tavern instantly fell silent. Old John, who was leisurely wiping the wine glasses behind the counter, rolled his eyes and muttered a few words. His carrot-like hand swiped lightly and pulled out a bottle of wine from under the counter, pushing it along the smooth surface of the counter. As the cork was pulled off, a fiery aroma that was so thick that it felt like it had substance began to ripple in the crowded tavern. Countless furry faces were fiercely sniffing the aroma, and sparkling saliva began to flow uncontrollably from their mouths. Langdon, who rarely drank alcohol, panted heavily. His bloodshot eyes widened as he raised his neck and gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. The spicy, fiery smell of alcohol instantly rushed into his internal organs. He could not help but bend over and cough loudly. Splashes of wine danced in the air. He coughed out more than half of the hard liquor he drank. The rat folk, who were wearing tattered cloth and walking on tiptoes, immediately swarmed over and crouched on the ground. They stuck out their big wet tongues and frantically licked the wine stains on the stone floor. Although they usually pretended to be human, once they encountered this kind of free benefit, they would immediately abandon their disguise and once again expose their nature as low-intelligence creatures. The management of Blissful City was too strict. Only intelligent creatures could become residents here, and they must have a human-like appearance. In order to be able to get an identity here, many ratfolk, gnolls, and lizardmen could only wear dirty cloth found in some garbage dump, stand up, and take strange, crooked steps to disguise themselves as demi-humans. In this small city ruled by fallen wizards, they had no means or way to make a living at all. They relied on inspecting the garbage discarded by the wizards to fill their stomach. Of course, they could only live a more comfortable life by doing some dark business such as petty theft. Looking at the ugly ratfolk in front of him beating and biting each other for a little bit of his vomit, Langdon gritted his teeth and wished he could kill them all with acid marsh. He was an honorable apprentice who had reached the level of a quasi-wizard. How could he be reduced to the company of a group of demons and monsters like this? An indescribable sorrow and resentment made it difficult for him to dispel the anger in his chest. Langdon tilted his head back and down the rest of the Lifire wine in one gulp. He tossed a magic crystal and staggered out of the tavern. What's wrong with Lord Langdon? Is this the first time I've seen such an abnormal behavior? In a dark corner, two shadows were quietly talking. Why, you still don't know? One of the shadows whispered, I heard something happened to his other half. Devil's Vine Lady? The other shadow suddenly exclaimed, You said something happened to the Devil's Vine Lady? Hush, hush. The first shadow paced around anxiously. Seeing that no one was paying attention to them, he warned in a low voice, You just came back from the west. You don't know the situation. The east side has been very lively these few days. I heard that a few quasi-sorcerers fought there, and even a few layers of the tunnels collapsed. You said the Devil's Vine Lady is dead? Who killed her? Who else could it be? Of course, she died at the hands of those bastards on the surface. I heard the wizards on the surface had nothing better to do, so they sent a group of apprentices here to steal our resources. The Devil's Vine Lady died at the hands of these newcomers. I heard. The shadow looked around and lowered his voice. I heard she died at the hands of a beginner apprentice called Grim. Before the black shadow could finish speaking, an earth-shattering sound drowned out its voice. The stone wall beside them was suddenly punched through by a terrifying fist, and a large hole was blasted open. A huge figure more than 3 meters tall barged in. With one hand in each hand, it forcibly picked up the two whispering fellows hiding in the shadows. The blazing stove in the tavern illuminated the figures of the two shadows. They were two gnolls. Damned lowly creatures, what right do you have to talk about me, Langdon? I hate hearing the name Grim. This is what will happen to anyone who dares to say it again. Following the angry roar of the tall figure, the power of ice and snow gathered in his palms. In a breath's time, the two gnolls were frozen into human-shaped ice sculptures. Then, the tall humanoid slammed the ice sculpture into the floor in the middle of the tavern. Even the flesh and blood inside were crushed into ice shard. You damn scum, stand up for me. I don't want anyone to mention that damned name again. If anyone can't remember this, I, Langdon, will use my death to remind them. Langdon, who had transformed into a terrifying giant, roared angrily. Grim, you damned bastard, I'll be waiting for you in the darkness of the underground. Grim was extremely busy these few days as he had no idea what was happening in the underground world. He had finished reading the books he brought from the Swamp Tower. All that was left was the accumulation of knowledge and analysis of spell models. This was the first defensive spell that Grim was about to obtain, and he was extremely enthusiastic about it. Flame Shield. This was the first defensive spell he had chosen for himself. However, in order to obtain it, Grim had to first master 4 to 5 basic subjects of witchcraft and a large amount of knowledge about witchcraft. From characteristics of fire elemental particles to regular arrangement of elemental energy, from effects of spiritual elements in spells to 100 questions on shaping Flame Shield, there were dozens of spells and techniques that Grim had to learn in advance. Although he had the AI chip to help him, it was still an arduous task to understand and master them all. However, according to the AI chip's calculations, Grim was very happy to know that he could obtain this Flame Shield before his next trip to the underground world. Chapter 75. Ever since he discovered that food could help a wizard apprentice adjust their bodies, the daily magic meal had become an unshakable part of his daily routine. Under his guidance, Mary quickly became a captive of delicious food and accompanied him in a frenzy of eating. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed to exercise every time after eating to help the absorption of elemental active substances, Grim would definitely have changed his meals to the magic meal. For the next few days, every morning was his unshakable time to study magic knowledge. He needed to make full use of the AI chip's help to instill a large amount of magic knowledge into his mind and then store it in a systematic way. Noon was the most important time of the day to enjoy food. The two of them tasted most of the magic set meals provided by the Magus Tower and chose the one that was most suitable for them. Grim's favorite was still the stir-fried heart and liver of a firehound, while Mary's favorite was the blood of a wyvern. The crazy expenditure of nearly 50 mana crystals per day resulted in the rapid growth of their physique. Grim's physique would increase by 0.3 every day. As for Mary, although her growth wasn't as terrifying, she was still beaming with joy and looked very satisfied. After eating the food, Mary would grab Grim and beat him up in the afternoon. In the arena, Grim became the best human punching bag and was tortured to death by Mary. Facing Mary, who was at full speed, Grim could only barely catch her flickering figure with his noble headband. If he had been just a little bit slower in controlling the flow of flames in his hands, 5 shallow wounds would have appeared on his body. In the first 3 days of the battle, Grim was covered in wounds after every battle. His body, which had just gained a bit of toughness, was now covered with claw marks as if he had been trampled by hundreds of cat girls. Grim sadly found that without the help of magic puppets, he was simply looking for trouble by fighting Mary alone. Mary could even use the most gentle touch to reduce his life force to 1 point, but his waving fire pillars could not even touch the hem of her clothes. Previously, he could use the sudden change of direction to catch Mary off guard, but the same technique was useless against an agile witch killer like Mary the second time. Without a suitable defensive spell, it would be impossible for Grim to defend against Mary's attacks with just the Burning Hand. As for why he didn't use flame arrows and flame spears, there was no need to discuss it. Even a close-range spell like the Burning Hand could not catch Mary, let alone the flame arrow and flame spear, which needed 3 seconds to cast a spell. In order to save some face for himself, Grim had to break his oath and secretly let the chip scan and store Mary's attacking methods and habits. He then built a small battlefield spellcasting support system. With the assistance of this system, the AI chip could capture Mary's battle stance and use its rapid calculation ability to deduce where Mary would most likely appear and where she would most likely attack. According to the AI chip's calculations, Grimm finally managed to capture Mary. Unfortunately, this short-lived success had enraged Mary. Under the continuous and ferocious attacks of a red phantom, Grimm did not even last for 5 seconds before he was reduced to a pile of HP. At this point, Grimm could not help but admire Mary for being able to accurately attack without the help of the AI chip. This fully revealed her perfect control over her enemy's life force and her heart-wrenching savagery. The Sorcerer Tower's arena also had many exquisite designs that were hard to imagine for outsiders. Sorcerer apprentices could choose between the two modes of sparring and life and death duels. In the sparring mode, once an apprentice's HP fell to a dangerous level, any attack from the opponent would trigger the arena's defense mechanism, which would protect the injured apprentice in a protective barrier that was difficult for outsiders to break. However, there was no such defense mechanism in the life or death mode. Mary's brilliance lay in the fact that she could reduce Grimm to a pile of HP every time without triggering the arena's defense mechanism. This was what Grimm feared the most. Therefore, almost every afternoon became a painful journey for Grimm to seek torture. Every time, he would be reduced to a pile of HP and dragged out of the arena by Mary. The only difference was how long he could last. On the first day, he lasted for half an hour. On the second day, he lasted for 15 minutes. On the third day, he had the chance to last longer, but because he angered Mary, he was killed in 5 minutes. On the fourth day, he lasted for half an hour. This was the most perfect coordination between him and the AI chip. On the fifth day, he managed to last for an hour without any damage. This was because his flame shield had appeared. Yes, it was unexpected. Under the pressure of the terrifying Blood Queen, Mary, Grimm had mastered the prerequisite knowledge of the flame shield and successfully cast it before the start of the battle. The flame shield was a shield-shaped defense spell made of condensed elemental flames. When the spell was successfully cast, it would automatically circle 1 meter around Grimm's body and hover around his body. Its area of defense was 1.5 meters high and 1 meter wide. Not only did it have excellent physical and spell protection, it also had the ability to reflect damage in close combat. Mary had tried it before. She used her high agility to get close to Grimm, but her sharp claws could not break through the fire shield to attack Grimm. The seemingly small flame shield turned out to be intelligent and could automatically adjust itself to the appropriate position to block all external attacks. So far, Mary had not mastered any famous close-range combat skills. Her attacking methods were still relatively primitive. She relied more on her agility and her strong body to fight head-on. If there was any special method, it would be to use her blood wizard power on her claws, so that her attacks could absorb the enemy's blood and nourish herself. However, this kind of attack without any powerful means was destined to be weak. It was maintained at around 9 to 13 points each time. The flame shield's defense was as high as 35 points, which was not something that a normal attack from Mary could break. Therefore, once Grimm mastered the flame shield, he immediately turned the tide of the battle. Previously, Grimm had been struggling to defend himself, but Mary's storm-like attacks had slowly whittled him down. It would have been better if he had not tried to counterattack, as he could have lasted longer. Once he gave up on defense and tried to capture Mary's ghostly figure, he would be toyed with to death by her, and the consequences would be unspeakable. But now, with the appearance of the flame shield, Mary's close combat attacks had not only failed to break it, but her claws had also been burnt black by the sudden explosion of the shield. Even her red dress, which did not have any defensive spells, had a few big holes burned. It was rare for him to have the upper hand, and Grimm was overjoyed. While admiring Mary's voluptuous body, he loudly chanted the spell of Flame Arrow, using the exploding flames to chase after Mary's figure. For the first time, he no longer had to worry about having 5 claw marks that were neither deep nor shallow inexplicably appear on his body while he was in a daze. Grimm's leisurely attack had obviously enraged Mary. In the 37th second, he was once again cut down by Red Dress Mary. But this time, the arena's defense mechanism was activated. A transparent barrier shielded him from view, while Red Robe Mary was bounced back by the barrier, revealing her charred body. Grim could not help but let out a long sigh when he saw Red Robe Mary glaring at him from behind the protective shield. This Mary was still as competitive as ever. With the strength of Mary's close combat attacks, it was impossible to break the flame shield, at least in theory. But when Grim met the competitive Mary, even the AI chip's calculations became unreliable. In a fit of rage, Red Dress Mary withstood the flame shield's damage and did not retreat. She also withstood Grim's flaming hand's double fire attack. She struck the same spot on the flame shield with an unimaginable triple attack, and used the method of stacking damage to break Grim's tortoise shell. Next, Grim became a Spartan. The pain of elemental flames roasting flesh was not something an ordinary person could endure. Although Mary could rely on her powerful body's regeneration and lifesteal rebirth to recover, she could not avoid this painful process. She could only rely on her strong willpower to endure it. She was not willing to let Grim overwhelm her even once in their daily training, even if it was just a little. She was actually willing to endure such great pain and torture. Her ruthlessness and stubbornness deeply moved Grim. If he were to ask himself, he would definitely not be able to do this. Facing this strong woman who was ruthless to her enemies and even more ruthless to herself, Grim could only write the word respect in his heart. But when he turned around, Grim secretly gave the AI chip a new research topic: how to use spiritual force to control the flame shield and dodge the enemy's stacking attacks. But it was a pity that after the 5th day, Mary no longer dragged Grim to the arena to exercise. Instead, she went to the public library of the Magus Tower and searched day and night for a way to break the elemental shield. Chapter 76. When he returned to the underground world again, Grim was no longer as nervous as before. Instead, he was looking forward to it. All the elite apprentices in the training camp had to step on the white bones of the fallen apprentices. Therefore, if Grim wanted to rise quickly, he had to absorb the flesh and blood of his kind to strengthen himself. After gathering in the mission hall, the team of 9 once again embarked on the dangerous journey underground. Matthew's accidental death and Leo's serious injury made the team realize how dangerous the underground world was. When they stopped at the outpost camp for a short while, they were arguing about how to complete the mission. Leo's injuries were still a burden to him. Of course, those flesh wounds had already healed, but there was still a curse deep in his heart that made him miserable. But after more than 10 days of recuperation, he finally got rid of all the curse. But it was difficult for his injured body to recover in a short period of time. Therefore, this also meant that the underground mission team this time had one less advanced apprentice, and the quasi-wizard Leo could only be used as an advanced apprentice. The lack of strength in the team made them not as brave as last time. They became more conservative and suggested to complete the mission with the whole team. Although this would take 3 or 4 times the time, it was undoubtedly the best in terms of safety. Those underground bastards probably didn't have the guts to attack a mission team with 3 prospective wizards and 5 senior apprentices. As soon as Isaac made this suggestion, most of the senior apprentices immediately responded. The flickering light from the temporary bonfire shone on the faces of every member of the team, leaving shadows on their well-defined faces. Every member of the team hid their expressions in the shadows, and only Isaac's impassioned speech was left in the field. We can't afford to lose our strength again. If we lose more people this time, we will be in a worse situation next time. So it's necessary to waste some time. This way we can better ensure that we complete the mission. Agreed. I think Isaac is right. Agreed. The other 3 senior apprentices, Sheila, Lyander, and Bruce, quickly expressed their agreement. Mary, the only senior apprentice who did not express her opinion, stood in the shadow of the rocky peak where the bonfire could not reach. Therefore, everyone could not help but look at Sabrina, who had always been the leader of the team. Sabrina raised her head and looked around. As her eyes rolled, a special mechanical sound was heard. Compared to last time, her head, which had obviously been modified by mechanical witchcraft, had some subtle and strange changes. However, no one could say for sure what had changed and what was strange about it. It was more of a vague feeling. Sabrina withdrew her gaze. Just as she was about to announce something, an unfamiliar voice suddenly sounded in the temporary camp. "You can team up if you want, but Mary and I will only carry out one mission." This voice was clear and firm. Everyone looked towards the source of the voice and were shocked. This was because the one who had spoken was the junior apprentice Grimm, who they did not see as a burden to the party. No, they could no longer call him Junior Apprentice Grimm. They should call him Intermediate Apprentice Grimm. They did not care about Grimm's increase in strength. In this gloomy and treacherous underground world, even senior apprentices would not be able to protect themselves when faced with danger. A newly advanced intermediate apprentice might not even have the ability to escape from the aftermath of a battle between strong people. Thus, he was excluded from the discussion just now. Mary, who was hidden in the darkness, did not say a word. It was obvious that she had silently agreed to this. This undoubtedly made everyone even more confused. "Do you know what you're talking about?" Sabrina's slightly deep and strange voice sounded in the camp. Although there was no threat in her words, there was no doubt that a strong and domineering aura could be felt. "Kid, you just stay there obediently. There's no room for you to speak here. If you really want to act alone, then go to the deepest cave." Isaac did not hold back and roared threateningly. "Okay, we'll go to the deepest cave." Grimm's answer was straightforward. What did you say?" Isaac's face showed a surprised expression. "I said that Mary and I will complete the mission in the furthest cave. After that, we'll return to the Magus Tower. You can take your time to explore the other 4 mission points." You, not to mention Isaac, even the other 2 quasi-sorcerers raised their heads and sized up this arrogant intermediate acolyte once more. However, no matter how they tried to sense him, the feedback from this young lad was very weak. It did not seem like he was some powerful person in disguise. Did he have something to rely on, or was there something strange about that red-robed Mary? Since they could not find an answer from Grimm, they could not help but look at Mary, who was in the shadows. "Humph, this scoundrel, always using me as a cover." Mary was roaring in her heart, but on the surface she still looked calm and composed. However, under the protection of the blood-red glow, the 3 quasi-sorcerers could not see through the protection of the blood elemental wizard power. "Is this what you want too?" Although Sabrina was sitting, a domineering aura was already rolling towards Mary. "Yes. Give us the mission item." Mary walked out of the shadows and spread out her fair and dazzling right hand, facing Sabrina, the would-be wizard. After a moment of silence, a magic wand-like item was thrown into Mary's hand. Mary examined the authenticity of the item with rapt attention and nodded in satisfaction. She kept the item and turned around to walk into the deep, winding tunnel ahead. "Wait, this is for you too." This time, Sabrina threw out a crystal ball. After Mary examined it carefully, her beautiful face was slightly stunned. She nodded at Sabrina with a complicated expression. "Thanks. I owe you one." She did not say anything else and disappeared into the darkness with Grimm. The right side of Sabrina's face, which was half covered by the silver mask, was expressionless. Only her left eye, which had been modified into a mechanical eye, emitted a scarlet light. "Let's go. There's still a long way to go." After a long while, Sabrina's deep voice finally sounded again. At this moment, Grimm and Mary were already walking through the pitch-black underground world. For the first time, the summoned demon crocodile hunter actually swallowed both of them, and then sank into the dark, lightless soil. Following the directions indicated by the witchcraft tool, they continuously passed through the dark caves and tunnels one after another. Fortunately, Mary wasn't an overly plump person. On the contrary, after hugging Mary, Grim felt that she was too soft and slender. However, she felt warm and smooth to the touch, and there was even a hint of fragrance in the darkness. It felt great. There was only a limited amount of space for the demon crocodiles, so the two of them could only hug each other and squeeze in the space. In the eyes of others, the two of them might be too flirtatious, but Grim could not enjoy it at all. This was because Mary's sharp nails were moving around on his back, and her sharp canine teeth were resting on his neck. If Grim had any ulterior motives, Mary would definitely leave him with an unforgettable memory since she was a quick-witted person. Perhaps this was Mary's personal code of conduct. I can take liberties with you, I can. If you dare to act rashly, I'll make sure you remember it forever. Although the two of them were entangled, Grim was gritting his teeth, afraid that he would lose control and bring disaster upon himself. Fortunately, there were still many things that could distract him. Thus, when his mind sank into the special vision of the demon crocodile hunter, he forgot about the awkwardness in front of him and focused on controlling the direction of the demon crocodile hunter. Before Sabrina left, she threw a crystal ball to Mary. It contained the route that she had explored during her last patrol, as well as the distribution of underground creatures and monsters that they might encounter along the way. With this clear three-dimensional map and the precise direction control of the AI chip, the demon crocodile hunter could pass through all the tunnels and rock walls along the way. Only when they encountered a large area of solid rock would they consider taking a longer route. That was why Grim only took 4 hours to reach the destination that Sabrina had taken 27 hours to reach last time. After emerging from a small, dark cave, Grim jumped off the demon crocodile hunter with Mary in his arms. After confirming the location of the mission point with the item again, they were less than 200 meters away from where they were. Only then did the two of them relax, but they immediately raised their vigilance. Those underground bastards had a lot of strange spells. Who knew if they would set up some automatic traps near the mission point? Once they found out about their whereabouts, the journey back would be 10 times more dangerous. However, Grim was calm about this. Apart from completing the mandatory mission given by the Wizard Tower, he had another more important mission to complete today. The elite mission of the training camp. Apart from fighting for rare underground resources, elite acolytes from both sides would try to ambush and kill each other's acolyte squads whenever they had the chance. In the depths of the underground, there were not only rare resources, but also special metal ores that were rarely seen on the surface. However, most of these ores and resources were under the control of Fallen Wizard. Each place was guarded by a team of 5 to 10 acolytes. Chapter 77. Mine number 7 was a bloodstone mine located deeper in the mission site. There, a special mineral called bloodstone was the most commonly produced. This thing itself was not very useful, but it was often used as a catalyst for various witchcraft experiments. In particular, bloodstone powder had an obvious effect on purifying magic potions, so it was very popular in the underground market everywhere. However, the reason the training camp sent Kevin's team there for a surprise attack was obviously not for a mere bloodstone mine, but for another kind of raw gemstone or that was associated with the bloodstone mine or blood garnet. As a raw gemstone or, once it fell into the hands of some jewelry masters, it could be processed into a variety of magical accessories. They would try every possible way to draw out the mysterious power contained within the gemstone, and the magical accessories made from it would have some incredible power. For example, the recovery earrings that Grim had sold before were made from a magical gemstone called emerald olive. Bloodstone ores, even elementary bloodstones that had undergone preliminary refinement, were worth no more than 10 magic crystals per kilogram in the underground market. In order to make a fortune by robbing them, the elite apprentices of the training camp would need to prepare a long underground caravan to transport them away. On the other hand, each raw blood garnet was only the size of an egg, but a large group of chambers of commerce and wizard families were willing to buy it at the price of 200 magic crystals per kilogram. Therefore, after comparing the two, Bald Fu decided to raid mine number 7 to plunder the blood garnets that had been stored there for half a month, instead of the overly heavy and cheap bloodstone ores. In the past, the underground attacks were more like a game of chess. The resource points and ore points occupied by both sides were almost constant, and the general strength of the other side was also clear at a glance. So today you lead a team to raid my resource point, and tomorrow I will lead a team to intercept and kill your mission team halfway. Both sides fought back and forth in this dark and deep underground tunnel, killing each other until the sky was dark and the earth was dark, and blood flowed like a river. However, there was one thing that both sides abided by very well, and there had never been any violations. That was, fighting was one thing, but no malicious destruction of resource points or ore points was allowed. Seriously speaking, a considerable part of the profits of surface wizards and fallen wizards were pinned on these continuously mined resources and minerals. Once someone set a bad example and destroyed the other party's resource point, it would be very difficult to protect their own resource point. Therefore, in order to prevent the two sides from breaking up, the two sides condensed these unwritten rules that could not be written down in the hundreds of years of competition. You can snatch the resources, but as long as the elite apprentices you send out can defeat our guardian, the resources will be yours. But destroying resources and the environment was not allowed. Anyone who maliciously destroyed a resource point would be hunted down by the Magi from both sides. Therefore, taking advantage of the short 200-meter journey, Grimm cautiously moved forward while telling Mary about the underground situation he knew. He had already made up his mind. He decided to use this trip to the underworld to pull Mary into Kevin's team and help her become an elite apprentice as soon as possible. However, in order to achieve this, Mary needed to perform well in the raid on mine number 7. According to what Kevin said, the training camp had already started to get in touch with the quasi-witch named Sabrina. As for the other members, before they displayed their extraordinary strength, they were just objects to be observed. They were not enough to pique Ah Fu's interest. When the team first arrived, there were 3 prospective wizards. Now, Grimm was considered a member of the training camp, and Sabrina was in the process of being contacted. As for the other 2 prospective wizards, Leo and Marcus, they were not in Ah Fu's eyes at all. Therefore, if Mary wanted to enter the training camp, she had to at least perform well in the underground raid. To be honest, she did not need Grimm to encourage her. Ever since she heard that the damn training camp had pulled Grimm into it without her participation, Mary was already in a state of rage. However, for someone as temperamental as her, the more angry she was, the brighter her smile would be. Perhaps she would only reveal her true colors when she hunted for food. This was a quiet and deep underground cave. Not long after it calmed down, 5 strange figures of different heights broke into the cave again. The person in the lead was tall and strong, surrounded by a light blue halo of ice crystals. Wherever he passed, the damp air was frozen by the sudden drop of the cold current and ice shards fell off. He was obviously the leader of the 5. Facing the empty underground cave, his angry roar echoed in the quiet cave. Where are they? Didn't they say someone broke in? Then where are they? Judging from his low and hoarse voice, it was the prospective wizard, Langdon. Langdon, don't be impatient. Since we promised to avenge you, we will not give up halfway. Today's incident is strange. We need to think about it. One of the black-robed men could not help but speak up. Yes. Today's incident is really strange. Since we got the news, we have been waiting for them. No matter which way they came to this mission point, they can't hide from us. But another black-robed man voiced out his doubts. But they strangely went around our interception net. Gary, is he the junior wizard apprentice you mentioned last time who can travel freely underground? The third black-robed man asked calmly. Hearing this, Langdon, who was leading the group, paused for a moment. The chill in the air grew even heavier. Immediately after, Langdon's cold roar sounded in the cave. The elemental aura here has not completely dissipated, which means they just left. If we move fast, we might be able to stop them. Felix, it's all up to you now. Felix, who was named by Langdon, was also a prospective wizard. It could be said that all the people Langdon had brought here today were prospective wizards. Being able to bring 4 prospective wizard apprentices to help him take revenge was enough to show that Langdon's strength was extraordinary. However, to be more precise, everyone had gladly accepted such a dangerous mission for the sake of the teacher behind him. And those who could be respected by a group of prospective wizards were, of course, the famous fallen wizards in Elysium City. Black Light. There was no one in Elysium City who did not know of this name. As a powerful fallen wizard, even in the gloomy crypt, the name Black Light was well known. As his disciple, Langdon was also a very influential figure among the fallen acolytes in Elysium City. Although Felix was a little unwilling to be named, Felix still stood out. "All of you, gather around me," Felix ordered coldly. He gently inserted the long staff in his hand into the hard stone floor beneath his feet. With the continuous influx of earth elemental energy, the fist-sized earthen yellow crystal at the tip of the staff emitted a dazzling elemental glow. Under the cover of the elemental glow, a faintly discernible and mysterious spell formation appeared on the floor beneath everyone's feet. "Everyone, gather together. We're about to teleport over." Hearing Felix's reminder, everyone gathered around him, placing themselves within the range of the mysterious spell formation. "Prepare yourselves. Do not resist the earth elemental teleportation. Go." Following Felix's shout, the mysterious spell formation beneath their feet suddenly surged with an uncountable amount of earth elemental energy. The earth elemental energy was so dense that it resembled smoke and fog. It wrapped around them, and as a strange earthen yellow ring of light swept past, the smoke suddenly solidified and instantly enveloped them into mud statues. The moment the mysterious spell formation disappeared, the 5 clay sculptures crumbled, turning into mud and dregs on the ground. Not a trace of flesh could be seen within the disintegrated mud statues. The 5 quasi-wizards had completely disappeared. Langdon had miscalculated and thought that Grimm would be eager to return to the surface after completing his mission. He had actually gone in the wrong direction and went to find trouble with Sabrina and the others. While the 5 fallen quasi-wizards had directly escaped to the upper passageway close to the surface with Felix's Terra teleportation spell, Grimm and Mary were lurking around the deeper part of mine number 7. The other members of Kevin's team had not arrived yet, so Grimm and Mary cooperated and began to investigate the surroundings of the mine. Grimm was responsible for sending Mary into the mine using the stealth ability of the demon crocodile hunter. Mary, on the other hand, transformed into a vampire bat that flew noiselessly, trampling through the entire mine. What was even more ridiculous was that Mary, who had swaggered through the area, had clearly memorized all the tunnels, miners, and the positions of the fallen Acolyte Guardian squad. She had even stored the information in a photographic crystal. Therefore, when Kevin and the other 5 members rushed to the hidden rendezvous point, what they saw was this clear 3-dimensional image of the mine pit. The miners were the ratfolk of the underground race. There were about 200 ratfolk miners in the entire mine number 7, and the guards were 17 underground mercenaries and 6 fallen apprentices. During the attack, the ratfolk wouldn't participate in the battle at all. Therefore, when planning, they only needed to consider the defensive forces. After all, for these ratfolk, no matter who controlled the mine, they would obey orders. As long as there was a sufficient daily supply of food, they did not care who they were serving. Looking at the panoramic view of the mine provided by the 2 newcomers, Kevin could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. Grimm's ability was like a bug. In the underground world, as long as there was no protective spell formation, he could go in and out. It was impossible to guard against him. Mary's vampire bat transformation was also very elusive. No one would be able to guard against a cold-blooded creature that could crawl along the top of the wall. But everything the other party had set up could not hide from the vampire's infrared vision and life perception. Chapter 78. Apart from the basic defensive strength, Kevin was especially concerned about the strength of the fallen acolyte. According to past practice, there would be at least 2 or 3 quasi-sorcerers among the 6 fallen acolytes, while the rest were all high-level acolytes. However, today was a little strange. There was only one quasi-sorcerer among the 6 fallen acolytes, which confused Kevin. The situation of the fallen acolytes was completely different from that of the Orthodox Magus Tower. The number of acolytes in an Orthodox Magus Tower was like a pyramid. In order to nurture a quasi-sorcerer, they needed at least 5 or 10 high-level acolytes as backup. In order to nurture a high-level acolyte, they also needed 5 or 10 intermediate acolytes as backup, and so on. It was by relying on the accumulation of numbers and resources that the Magus Tower was able to discover elite acolytes with astonishing potential and talent from hundreds or thousands of beginner acolytes, and then nurture them. However, the structure of the fallen acolytes, who were hiding underground, was completely different. In the fallen acolytes' camp, there were almost no beginner or intermediate acolytes. In their eyes, there was no need for trash to exist. All the resources had to be concentrated in the hands of acolytes with potential and strength. Therefore, under this cruel law of the Black Forest, the ratio of quasi-sorcerers among the fallen acolytes was extremely high. Sometimes, it could even reach a ratio of 1-to-1 with high-level acolytes. This was also what gave the elite acolytes in the training camp the most headaches. If both sides met and the number of quasi-sorcerers was equal, they could still fight. However, if they did not have enough quasi-sorcerers, the battle would most likely end in a one-sided defeat. After all, a quasi-sorcerer without an opponent of the same rank was the difference between a wolf and a goat. No matter how well-equipped the goat was, and how many times its opponent, it would still be powerless against an unscrupulous wolf. However, who would have thought that there was only one quasi-sorcerer among the 6 fallen acolytes in mine number 7? This ratio was obviously lower than the norm. On the other hand, there were 2 quasi-sorcerers among the 6 members in Kevin's team, and the rest were all powerful high-level acolytes. This kind of strength was enough to crush the opponent. As for the 17 underground mercenaries, apart from a few strong fellows, the rest were almost ignored by the acolytes. If a battle between apprentices really broke out, no matter how many of them there were, they would be nothing more than rotten meat sent to their deaths. According to Grimm's plan, in a battle where his side had the upper hand, they would definitely use bait, ambush, assassination, and all sorts of tricks. But when the battle really started, he was dumbfounded. So this was how the underground battle was carried out. Without concealing their superior strength, Kevin led his 5 teammates, Grimm and Mary, to quickly occupy the entrance of mine number 7. Then, he threw 2 elemental fireballs to intimidate them, and the opposing defenders swarmed out of the mine. This was a natural karst cave the size of 3 football fields. It was a perfect battlefield for both sides to fight. It could be seen that this place had been through many trials. Collapsed stalagmites and stalactites were strewn all over the place, broken rock walls covered in scorched or black stripes, and the stone floor was covered in mottled bloodstains that had not been cleaned for years. At the 2 ends of the cave, the 2 factions quickly lined up and faced each other with 200 meters between them. Of course, the ones in front were the underground mercenaries. The mercenaries had incomplete equipment, and most of them could not even gather a set of leather armor. They walked into the battlefield in ragged clothes. The 17 mercenaries included 3 gnoll assassins, 2 lizardman beast tamers, 1 spirit catcher and 11 werewolf warriors. Apart from the 3 Knoll assassins and the spirit catcher that he needed to pay some attention to, the rest of them were just meat dishes that attracted the enemy's attention on the battlefield. The fallen quasi-sorcerer hiding at the back of the team was a middle-aged man with a dark and thin face. When he saw the 2 surface quasi-sorcerers in the opposing team, his face turned so gloomy that black water could be squeezed out. "Damn it, damn it, damn it!" That bastard Felix said that it would not be a problem for him to leave for a day or 2. How did they seal off the passage to the upper level and let such a powerful team pass through? "Felix, you bastard! If this garrison mission fails, you'll have to bear all the responsibility." He roared madly in his heart, but on the surface, this fallen quasi-sorcerer was still calm and composed as he began to issue battle orders. Colorful elemental shields began to rise on the bodies of the sorcerer apprentices. Bright red flame shields, crackling lightning shields, pink smoke suddenly pervading the air, ice crystal armors that attacked people with chilling air, and thorny armor that stood tall and upright with a green aura in the blink of an eye. All the sorcerer apprentices had wrapped their bodies in different colors, shapes, and effects of elemental protection. Of course, this was only a benefit for the sorcerer apprentices. The mercenaries who were used as meat shields did not enjoy this benefit. Unknowingly, the 3 Knoll assassins in the enemy team had already disappeared. Meanwhile, the 2 Lizardman summoners loudly chanted in the Lizardman language that was difficult to understand. Very quickly, they summoned 4 tall petrified lizards in front of them. 11 werewolf warriors wore tattered leather armor. They held a flail or a thick wooden stick in one hand and a simple wooden shield in the other. They shouted loudly as they rushed over. Behind them, after the fallen sorcerer apprentices completed their individual defense, they hurriedly chanted loudly again. This time, they were chanting the incantation of an offensive spell. "Grim, I'll leave these small fries to you." Although Kevin was a high-level sorcerer apprentice who was more inclined towards close-range attacks, after loudly ordering Grim, he still chose to fight back with long-range spells with his companions. Ever since Mary mutated into a vampire, she seemed to have forgotten all her previous spells. Currently, she only had some passive racial talent. Therefore, facing this kind of battle, her figure flashed and disappeared into the shadows around her, disappearing without a trace. More than 10 colorful offensive spells crisscrossed in the air above the cave. Some intercepted, some collided, and some stirred up a splendid sea of elements. The violent and completely irregular elemental explosions swept through the center of the battlefield, and also involved the charging werewolf team. Of the 11 werewolf warriors, less than half were lucky enough to pass through the death zone. Even the remaining 5 were riddled with wounds and were still in a state of shock. Unfortunately, before they could regroup and form a formation again, a gigantic creature suddenly appeared in front of them. The earth spears and a large area of earth spear spikes were shot out, and they were all wiped out in one fell swoop. The weakness of ordinary underground creatures in the face of witchcraft users was evident from this. Grim rode on the magic crocodile, but did not order it to charge forward. The fallen sorcerers were in a neat formation. If he recklessly charged forward, they would only need one volley to blast him and the magic crocodile into pieces. Grim finally understood. No wonder both sides needed to form such a neat formation that resembled the armies of a human kingdom. The fundamental reason was the terrifying offensive power of elemental sorcery. Although those quasi-sorcerers were all high and mighty, and in small-scale battles, they would often beat 2 or 3 high-level sorcerers to the point of wetting their pants and running away. However, in this kind of situation, no matter how arrogant and conceited they were, they did not dare to charge into the enemy's formation. Most of the individual defensive spells of quasi-sorcerers had a base defense of 80 to 100 point. This kind of defense could be broken by a volley of spells from 3 high-level sorcerers. Therefore, before they advanced to become sorcerers, they did not dare to take the risk before their bodies could withstand a small volley of spells. Therefore, even though Kevin's side had the advantage in numbers, he still chose the safest oppressive tactic. He used his side's superior sorcery power to directly crush the enemy's team. After just 2 rounds of attacks, the difference in sorcery power between the two sides became obvious. Although many spells were intercepted and countered, the number of spells on Kevin's side that fell into the enemy's formation was obviously higher. Amidst the dazzling and explosive waves of spells, the fallen sorcerer's team began to panic. Most of the external defenses of the fallen sorcerers had dimmed, and a few of them had even been injured. On the other hand, Kevin's team was still in a neat formation, fully equipped with defense. Grim was high up on the demon crocodile, allowing the native hunters to continuously throw earth spears at the slowly climbing petrified lizards. He also followed Kevin's instructions and contributed a flame spear, causing a high-level sorcerer in the enemy's team to wail like a wolf. He stood high and could see far. He had a comprehensive view of the whole situation and soon discovered Mary's whereabouts. At the edge of the battlefield, a muffled groan was suddenly heard from the shadows. Immediately after, the hazy and illusory figure of a gnoll assassin suddenly appeared. It covered its throat with its hand and staggered a few steps before falling to its knees. Blood gushed out from the gaps between its fingers, and it could not stop it no matter how hard it tried. Just as it was about to die, the sound of metal clashing suddenly came from the shadows nearby. Soon, another gnoll assassin was forced out of the shadows. Its eyes had been stabbed, and its body was covered with terrifying claw marks of varying depths. It waved its dagger wildly in the air, shouting loudly. Unfortunately, it could no longer see any enemies. When the blood in its body was almost completely drained, it let out a low hiss and fell to the ground. The death of 2 of its companions finally frightened the third person. The last gnoll assassin suddenly appeared, turned around, and ran away as fast as it could. Unfortunately, before it could run more than 10 meters, a dazzling red light flashed, and its head flew into the sky. The headless body ran a few more steps before falling to the ground. Chapter 79. Beautiful, beautiful. Vampires were indeed the nobles of the night. Even killing people was done with elegance and calmness. It was so artistic. Grim could not help but praise in a low voice. Then he threw the flame spear in his hand again. This time, his target was a guy with 5 skulls hovering around him. The flame spear suddenly exploded and took away 2 of the skulls, which made the apprentice furious. He waved his black staff at Grim, and invisible curses kept attacking him. Grim commanded the native hunter to block all the curses for him, while he focused on attacking the necromancy apprentice. Curse attacks, carrion flying insects, voodoo skulls, bone spears, blind eyes. The spells that the apprentice could use were really eye-opening for Grim. If it was not for the help of the chip's elemental vision, he would not have been able to defeat the necromancy apprentice even if he had 9 lives. The only things that he could threaten the enemy were his flame spear and the native hunter's earth spear. The lack of long-range spells made Grim think that he needed to develop a magic puppet for long-range attacks from time to time. Although Grim was not strong enough to break the defense of the necromancy apprentice, the team behind him could. After gaining the upper hand in the battle, the unbridled and chaotic witchcraft attacks put a lot of pressure on the fallen apprentices on the other side. Many of the apprentices began to slowly retreat, unable to hold on any longer. This was the basic pattern of the battle between the two sides. First, the two sides formed a group formation and attacked each other with long-range spells like soldiers. Once one side could not hold on, the other side would collapse. Then, it would be a small-scale battle. Usually, the battle would break out between 2 or 3 apprentices, and the battlefield could be anywhere in the surroundings. Finally, with the powerful spells of the 2 quasi-sorcerers on Kevin's side, the opposite side of the team collapsed. The apprentices, who had lost their confidence in winning, turned around and escaped into the surrounding underground tunnels with their bodies full of injuries. It was obvious that they were running away like birds and beasts, with no intention of covering each other or helping each other. Moreover, the 6 fallen apprentices were all on their own. There were no signs of them running away together. On the long escape route to the blissful city, perhaps the companions with ulterior motives were far more terrifying than the enemies chasing after them. Kevin whistled, and the 8 members of the team split into 2 groups, chasing after the fallen apprentice. A quasi-sorcerer and Kevin set their sights on the enemy quasi-sorcerer, while the remaining quasi-sorcerer formed a separate team. The rest of the team members split into different groups and chased after the enemy into the darkness. Grim didn't greet anyone, and instead commanded the crocodile to chase after his old rival. The dark tunnel was silent. Alan once again activated the ring of agility on his right pinky, increasing his speed by a few notches. The rugged terrain in the shadows wasn't a hindrance at all. His thin and shriveled body seemed to possess boundless energy, supporting him to quickly pass through one cave after another. The roads in the underground world were always winding, broken, and complicated. In every small cave or karst cave, there were countless narrow passages that could barely allow a person to pass through. Taking advantage of his familiarity with the terrain, in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Alan had escaped for 3 miles, passing through more than a dozen tunnels and caves. When the glow of the agility spell disappeared from his body, Alan finally stopped. He leaned against a solid rock wall, gasping for air. His chest was so thin that his ribs could be clearly seen, and his breath was like a broken bellow. Although the surroundings were quiet, Alan was still holding the black staff tightly in his hand. As long as there was any sound or movement around him, he would be able to activate the white bone spear stored in the white crystal on top of the staff within half a second. After gasping for a while, Alan finally stabilized his breathing. He listened to the road he came from, but he didn't hear any strange sounds. Maybe he was lucky that no enemies were chasing after him? Aaron let out a self-deprecating sneer. Ever since he became a necromancy apprentice, his luck had never been good. It seemed that even the will of the wizarding world hated him, making him a pathetic abandoned child. Although he didn't sense anything strange, Alan still felt very uneasy. In the silent darkness, there seemed to be a ferocious beast peeping at him, ready to swallow him at any time. No, I have to get out of here. Alan made up his mind. When he was about to leave, he realized that the wet soil under his feet had turned into a slowly flowing acid swamp. His feet had sunk into it without him knowing. Damn it, it's the acid swamp spell. Alan patted his neck heavily. The white bone necklace around his neck flashed, and 2 skulls with the ability to attack and defend appeared around him again. When he was escaping just now, in order to avoid attracting attention, he had turned off his personal protection, which was why he had fallen into the enemy's trap. After experiencing the previous battle, his white bone's defense was clearly at its lowest level. Under the corrosion of the dense negative energy, the acid swamp under his feet made a sizzling sound, and Alan quickly got rid of the acid swamp spell. 2 muffled thuds sounded. In the darkness not far away, a shadow that looked like a dark mountain began to move forward, and the earth element was even denser. Damn it, it's that bastard who rode a mud crocodile. That kid was so brave. He was only a middle-level wizard, but he dared to chase after a high-level fallen apprentice. Aaron laughed sinisterly. He opened his mouth wide and spat out a large number of buzzing black insects from his dirty mouth. In the blink of an eye, they gathered into a black cloud and surged towards the huge shadow. He also quickly chanted a hoarse and unpleasant witchcraft spell. From time to time, a fist-sized skull would appear in his hand, and he would throw it into the distance with a pale green glow. This kind of voodoo skull that he made himself would explode violently no matter what it touched. Apart from causing great physical damage to the enemy, it also had a voodoo attack. The terrifying voodoo poison was a compound poison that could even melt rock. But just as he was expecting to hear the screams of the enemy, a flaming spear suddenly lit up the entire cave and appeared in another position. Amidst the raging flames, a handsome young man was smiling at him, and the flaming spear was held in his hand. Don't kill me, we can talk." Alan looked at the flame spear in horror. The flame spear pierced the skull and exploded, and the blinding elemental flames swept toward where he was. After 3 fingers, Alan staggered out of the sea of fire. He was in a miserable state. The little flesh on his body was burnt to a crisp by the flames, and half of the few magic tools he had were destroyed. The white crystal on the top of his cane had also been broken. The ghosts and vengeful souls that were bound by the necromancy spell began to escape one after another. Kid, do you think you can kill me like this? Today's matter is not over. The next time we meet, Alan clawed the ground and cursed angrily. His right pinky finger began to emit a white light. That was the light of an escape spell. The spell hidden in his pinky finger was his last resort to save his life. Seeing that he would be able to escape with 2 fingers, Alan's murky eyes shone with hope. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt the rock wall beside him move. When he looked over in shock, he was shocked to discover that an incomparably huge eye was staring at him coldly. A huge triangular snake head, a wide mouth, jagged fangs, and a snake's tongue that flicked in and out. Everything that formed this terrifying giant snake was actually rock. Cold and hard rock. Just as he realized all this, the giant snake opened its mouth wide and swallowed him whole. After a long time, the cave finally returned to its peaceful state. Grim stood silently in a corner of the cave, not riding on the demon crocodile. In the battle just now, he used the demon crocodile hunter to attract most of the enemy's attacks, and he took advantage of the situation to break the enemy's defense. In the end, it was the rock python that appeared for the first time that he killed it. There was a slight tremor in the darkness. The demon crocodile hunter came near him, and the aborigine hunter on its back had already melted, leaving only half of its body. On the other side, the rock rumbled, and a huge rock python slithered towards him. It opened its mouth and spat out a broken body. Haha, a high-level fallen apprentice's head is in my hands. However, the corpse of a necromancer was still scary. That was why Grim did not do it himself. Instead, he waited for the aborigine hunter to repair itself before letting it search the enemy's body for spoils of war. Then, he let the demon crocodile hunter swallow him into its stomach. After that, he swaggered back to the battlefield. Some of his teammates who went out to kill the enemy had already returned. Only a few had succeeded, and most returned empty-handed. It could not be helped. The underground world was too suitable for escaping. They could create a cave-in anywhere, and the pursuers would return empty-handed. Moreover, the fallen apprentice's life-saving skills were top-notch. Defeating them was easy, but killing them was much more difficult. Kevin and the quasi-sorcerer in the team could not kill the enemy quasi-sorcerer. Instead, another quasi-sorcerer successfully brought back a head. The remaining advanced apprentices did not manage to kill them, so when Grimm's demon crocodile hunter spat out an enemy's corpse, everyone could not help but look at him in a different light. A camp battle was a camp battle. Although Grimm took advantage of his opponent's unfamiliarity with him, and luckily won 2 battles, it did not mean that he was really that strong. However, when the corpse of the fallen apprentice appeared, everyone looked at him differently. Chapter 80. Just as everyone was praising Grimm, a red shadow flashed and Mary came back. With a powerful swing, a withered head with teeth bared was thrown in front of everyone. Kevin was only a senior apprentice, but he could command 2 prospective sorcerers. He must have some special tricks up his sleeve. However, he was also embarrassed by today's situation. As elite apprentices specially trained by the training camp, the 6 of them only got 1 head in total, while the 2 newbies got 1 each. This made him, the elite team leader, secretly exclaim that the newbies were fierce. Out of the 6 fallen apprentices guarding the mine, they had managed to kill half of them. This kind of achievement was quite commendable. However, more than an hour had passed since they started fighting, and there was not much time left for them to plunder resources. After all, the number 7 mine was deep in the underground world, and it would be difficult for them to defend it. Once the reinforcements from Elysium City arrived, it would be a new battle royale. The ratfolk who were working as miners were not afraid of Kevin and his team. The ratfolk queen even came out to haggle with them. She even offered to waive all fees as long as an apprentice was willing to sleep with her. She even gave them some of the ratfolk tribe's treasures for the past year. However, looking at the ratfolk queen's fluffy little face, round body and plump breasts, all the elite apprentices could not help but feel disgusted. Every time the ratfolk queen looked at them, they would have goosebumps and want to vomit. So, after paying 500 magic crystals in double, Kevin got 26 blood garnets from the ratfolk queen. Each of these blood garnets was the size of an egg, and the total value was estimated at 4,800 magic crystals. If they were successfully brought back, each member of the team would get 200 to 500 magic crystals. The reason why there was such a big difference in the rewards was related to the contribution of the team members during the mission. For example, Grim, Mary, and the prospective sorcerer had directly taken ahead, so the reward distribution would definitely be biased. After discussing with the 2 prospective sorcerers, Kevin quickly came up with a specific distribution plan. Prospective sorcerer Grim would get 3, prospective sorcerer Randolph 2, Kevin 2, Grim 2, Mary 2, and the other 3 senior sorcerers would each get 1. As for the remaining 12 pills, they needed to be handed over to the training camp to be purchased by the Turlock Trading Company behind Baldy Fu. Only then would the profits be distributed evenly among the individuals. As for the blood garnet that each person obtained, they could deal with it themselves. Presumably, those rich and imposing sorcerer families would definitely take the initiative to discuss the purchase of blood garnet. Since the mission here was completed, the only problem left was how to return safely. According to past experience, returning from the mission point to the surface was the most dangerous part of the journey. Most of the mission team's casualties occurred during this process. Therefore, having the life to earn money but not the life to spend it was still a very cold problem. The idea of returning to the camp together was the worst, and the probability of being ambushed was 100%. Regardless of whether it was the cunning underground monsters or the corrupted acolytes who caught wind of the news, their return journey would be fraught with danger. Therefore, at this time, it was best for them to go their own ways and return to the surface using their own method. If they could not escape, they could only blame themselves for being too weak and not others. Therefore, after the spoils of war were distributed, everyone said goodbye to each other and went their separate ways. There were at least 80 paths leading to the surface anyway. As long as they were not that unlucky, they would not have to worry about being blocked. When everyone had dispersed, Mary jumped onto the demon crocodile and looked around with her scarlet eyes. She shouted impatiently, "Let's go! I feel that this mission is a bit dangerous, as if someone is watching us. Be careful on the way back." Grim's heart skipped a beat and he could not help but frown. In this era where willpower was king, Grim did not dare to ignore any signs of danger. This was especially true for Mary, an ancient mutant whose power came from a mutated bloodline. Her understanding of the plane's laws was far deeper than his. If even she felt a little uneasy, it meant that something bad was about to happen to them. Grim picked up Mary again and merged with the demon crocodile. The demon crocodile's huge body slowly sank into the ground and disappeared. Using the demon crocodile's earth magic, Grim patrolled the surrounding area, but did not find any suspicious traces. After ruling out the possibility that mine number 7 was a trap, Grim could only lead the demon crocodile back to the surface skeptically. According to his previous habits, Grim would run along the underground path for a while and only choose to go through when he had to detour. This would minimize the consumption of the demon crocodile's earth magic. But now that he was on guard, he did not care about the magic consumption. Instead, he chose to go underground all the way and quietly make his way to the surface. As there were large stretches of metal ores and hard rock formations everywhere, he had to constantly choose his way through. Therefore, it was impossible for him to travel too quickly through the mud. 3 hours later, they were already halfway through the journey. Grim finally relaxed a little. However, just as he was driving the demon crocodile hunter to pass through 2 huge rock formations that stretched for several miles, the demon crocodile's huge body seemed to have passed through a calm surface of water. The earth magic that filled its entire body suddenly went out of control. It was a trap. Grim instantly realized that something was wrong. However, as the demon crocodile's earth magic went berserk, the huge pressure of the earth around it suddenly increased. Grim's expression changed. He hurriedly drove the demon crocodile into the nearest underground passage. It was a deep, dark, and silent passage. The passage was winding and unfathomable, like the intestines of a terrifying giant beast. Most of the passage was between the rock formations. Only a small part of the passage was still wet and dark. But at this moment, this section of the mud wall suddenly boiled and exploded with a bang. A huge object rushed into this passage with mud and gravel flying in all directions. Soon after, 2 humanoid shadows rushed out from the gigantic creature. "What's wrong? What's wrong with your crocodile?" Mary's anxious voice sounded in the darkness. "It's an ambush. There's a special spell formation in the area we just passed. It can actually interfere with the operation of the demon crocodile's earth magic. We have to get out of here as soon as possible." Mary was slightly startled. Her scarlet eyes shone brightly in the darkness. "Which way?" Grim's eyes were also flickering under the goggles. Looking at the dark passage on both sides, he could not make up his mind. "Humph!" Mary snorted. "Let me do it." Mary abruptly stood up straight, her body facing one side of the tunnel. She took a deep breath and abruptly roared. Her voice was so sharp and high-pitched that Grim could only feel a buzz in his head. He could not hear anything else. As the strange sound waves quickly spread in the passage, Mary closed her eyes and stood still, as if she was listening to something. The passage is 327 meters long, winding upwards. At the end there's a small cave. Inside. Mary paused, and her voice suddenly turned sharp. 2 people. There are 2 people rushing towards us." Grim's eyes suddenly turned fierce. 2 people? And they were rushing towards this place without any scruples. Needless to say, they must have thought that they could easily defeat the 2 of them. Even without facing them, Grim was sure that they were 2 quasi-wizard level fallen apprentices. Since the enemy was so well prepared, the surrounding passages would not be safe. Grim waved his hand to disperse the demon crocodile hunters. He picked up the 2 summoning magic crystals from the disintegrated soil, turned around, and ran towards the other side of the passage with Mary. The floor of the underground passage was always rugged and slippery. The uneven ground and the intersecting small protrusions made it difficult for Grim, who had less than 5 points of agility, to move forward. Even if he walked steadily on this kind of path, he could still slip, not to mention running with all his might. The uneven ground was not a big deal, but the problem was that the top of his head was not smooth either. Thick and thin stalagmites quietly blocked the way forward. If a person only cared about looking down at the road, it was easy to bump into one of the stalagmites. So in the first half of the journey, Grim dragged Mary along, but after running for less than 10 meters, Mary used her arms to support Grim. The damp and cold air rushed into Grim's face through his mouth, nostrils, trachea, and into his rapidly rising and falling lungs. Grim felt a chill down his spine, but his mind was extraordinarily calm. Under glimmer vision, a dark tunnel appeared beneath Grim's feet, and the stalagmites in front of him expanded rapidly. However, just as Grim was about to cry out in surprise, the stalagmites slid past him with a whoosh. At this moment, Mary had turned into a ghost traversing in the darkness. Her soft and agile feet only needed to lightly tap on the protrusions on the ground, and they could glide through the air at high speed. Every stalagmite and every narrow passage was a flat road in her eyes. She only needed to lightly tap on the protrusions with the tips of her feet to move through them nimbly and silently. Mary might have already gotten used to this kind of speed. But for someone with less than 5 points of agility, Grimm's current mood was even more exciting than riding the craziest and most thrilling roller coaster. If it wasn't for the strong wind pressure pressing against his throat, he would have already vomited. Just as the two of them were running quickly in the dark and deep underground, the passage in front of them suddenly narrowed to the point where only one person could barely pass through. At the narrowest part of the passage, a lightning net suddenly flashed and blocked the way. This lightning net covered the sky and covered the earth, blocking the entire passage. At the edge of the electric net and the rock wall, sparks of electricity splashed out, blinding everyone's eyes. The crackling sound of electricity was even clearer. Chapter 81. With just a moment's hesitation, the tunnel behind him was filled with earth energy, and a strange rune formation could be faintly seen on the floor. Immediately, 2 tall figures appeared from the rune formation. It was a teleportation spell, not an underground tunnel. Grimm's eyes flashed with a blue light. With just a glance, he was able to discern the method of the newcomer. Although the opponent was using a teleportation spell, he could not sense any traces of spatial fluctuations. Instead, Earth origin force filled the air, as if this teleportation spell was powered by Earth origin force. However, this was not the time to stop and study it. There were pursuers behind him and an ambush in front of him. The situation was worrying. "You're Mary, right?" One of the two behind her slowly walked forward and spoke coldly. "Very well, the two who killed Gerald are both here today. I'll extract your souls and imprison them in the soul-binding corpses for tens of thousands of years." It was a tall and handsome noble youth. His light blue robes flickered with dazzling runes in the darkness, and a terrifying frost energy began to spread throughout the tunnel. "Gerald? Who's that?" Mary could not make heads or tails of the situation. If the name Gerald sounds unfamiliar, then what about the Devil Vine Girl? The noble youth's handsome face began to contort, his expression strange and sinister. "The Devil Vine Girl! The Devil Vine Girl!" Grimm and Mary exclaimed at the same time. They could not help but feel that this was not an undeserved calamity. An enemy had actually come knocking on their door. Looking at his age, it was very likely that he was the Devil Vine Girl's partner. This was going to be fun. "What is the soul-binding corpses he mentioned?" Mary could not help but ask in a low voice. "It's a type of undead creature. It's made from a living person. Before the enemy dies, draw a special witchcraft circle on their body. That way, when the enemy dies in the sacrificial ritual, their soul will be imprisoned in an immortal body, becoming an eternal slave of the caster," Grimm quickly replied. With the help of the AI chip, Grimm had a terrifying photographic memory of many basic knowledge and obscure subjects in the Magus world. The noble youth strolled forward and added on his behalf, "What you said is only the lightest punishment. After all of you become soul-binding corpses, I will find a deserted place underground and bury you. I will let you suffer in silence and darkness for 100 years while you are conscious. Don't worry, I will visit you from time to time. I guarantee that your souls will always be intact and your memories will always be clear. You won't be able to go crazy even if you want to." "Ha ha! Ugh!" Grimm could not help but feel a chill run down his spine. He felt that he had underestimated the evil and madness of the enemy. "Which way?" Mary whispered to him while he was still laughing wildly. "In front," Grimm replied in a low voice. "There are 2 quasi-sorcerers behind them. I can only sense a soul aura in front, so I can only force my way through. Alright. As soon as the two of them finished speaking, Grimm's body burst into flames and a flame shield appeared around him. Mary hugged Grimm, and the two of them intertwined their bodies tightly. Without any hesitation, she threw herself into the lightning net. You still want to run? The noble in blue roared, and his body suddenly expanded several times. A giant hand covered in bristles viciously grabbed at the two of them. Without the slightest hesitation, the two of them plunged into the lightning storm like a pair of sharp arrows. The giant hand of the noble in blue barely managed to grab the two of them. As soon as the tip of his finger touched the lightning net, the paralyzing electricity scorched it black. After the pain, the noble in blue roared and retracted his giant hand. The hand that was as thick as a stone pillar returned to normal in a blink of an eye. However, there was a burn mark between his fingers, and there was a faint black smoke coming out. Damn it, Hegel! Get rid of your lightning trap! The noble in blue roared loudly, but the target of his roar was obviously not in front of him. As soon as Grimm and Mary entered the net of lightning, the rampaging electric currents found them. Of course, the first to bear the brunt of it was the flame shield that Grimm had summoned. The raging electric arcs splashed dazzling sparks on the flame shield. The terrifying electricity that was enough to burn an ordinary person into charcoal made the shield crackle. The lightning energy was so dense that it had condensed into a terrifying blue plasma that floated less than a meter away from Grimm's head, slowly drifting about. A normal flame shield's defense was only 35 points, but Grimm had an affinity with fire, so the flame shield that he summoned increased its defense to 50 points. However, it was still not enough to protect them through the short distance of less than 10 meters. 10 meters! With Mary's extraordinary agility, the distance of 10 meters could be covered in the blink of an eye. However, at this moment it seemed so long and dangerous. The flame shield disappeared before it could cover half of the distance. The high-temperature plasma that had accumulated outside rushed in, and it would take less than half a finger to turn Grimm into a wisp of green smoke. Mary's physique was much higher than Grimm's, so she had a great chance of surviving the second half of the lightning journey. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Just as Grimm's body trembled and he was about to close his eyes and wait for death, Mary suddenly shouted. Waves of blood surged out of her body and instantly enveloped the two of them. No matter how pure the blood origin energy was, it could not withstand the violent and ferocious scorching plasma. The two of them were like fresh meat roasted on a fire, and the blood origin energy that lingered around them was instantly evaporated and devoured countless times. In the end, the thin blood source force could not completely protect the two of them. Mary gritted her teeth and moved most of the remaining blood source force to Grimm's side, exposing most of her body to the electric current and plasma. Squeak! The terrifying sound of roasting flesh and blood could be heard. Mary's exposed body was immediately charred, and then turned into ashes that fluttered in the air. On the other side of the narrow passage, a short gnome was staring at everything in front of him with his mouth agape. Of course, he had seen everything that had happened in the lightning net clearly. But even though he had seen it with his own eyes, he still could not believe what he had seen. There was actually someone who dared to barge into his lightning trap. How was this possible? But whether he believed it or not, this scene had happened. And right in front of him, there was a soft pop, and a large mass of charred black things rushed out of the lightning net and fell heavily to the ground. Little guy, you're quite tenacious. That's good too. Langdon will owe me 2 big favors in a while. The short gnome was thin and ugly, but he was a real human. At this moment, when he saw that 2 prey had unexpectedly bumped into him, he immediately bent down to grab them with great joy. In his palm, a fine and gentle lightning glove was clearly visible. Any living thing that was touched by this paralyzing lightning would not be able to stand up on its own for a quarter of an hour. Bada! With a soft sound, a crystal-clear elemental crystal core fell to the floor. The dwarf was slightly taken aback. He was about to pick it up, but before he could get close, a thick cloud of earth elemental smoke enveloped him. Huh, what is this? The gnome's curiosity was piqued. At this moment, Langdon's loud roar came clearly from the other side of the lightning net. Just as the gnome was hesitating whether to catch the two first or turn off the lightning trap, there was a sudden loud rumble in the area shrouded by the earth elemental smoke. A behemoth had burrowed out of the ground, coiled around its thick body, and pounced fiercely at him. A rock-like body, a rock-like snake head, a snake's tongue and fangs. This is a rock python. The gnome disappeared on the spot in a flash, and when he reappeared, he was already behind a rock peak 20 meters away. And where he had been, the rock python's terrifying, hard, fanged mouth slammed into the rock floor. In an instant, the earth cracked, the rock formation shook, and the entire cavern collapsed in the rapid turbulence. The rock python pulled its head out of the floor and raised its body again. Its earth-yellow eyes instantly locked on the gnome not far away, and it charged violently again. Damn it, what the hell is this? Startled, the dwarf stomped his feet and cursed. He rubbed his hands together and the violent and turbulent lightning struck the python's head, firmly holding it back. The wantonly splashing electric current burned the rock python's head, and even its hard rock skin began to melt like hot wax under the extreme heat. However, the giant rock python relied on its thick skin and didn't care about such a small loss. It continued to charge forward. Left with no choice, the gnome could only use lightning to jump elsewhere. Hagel, what the hell are you doing? Hurry up and turn off the lightning trap. On the other side of the passage, Langdon heard the earth-shattering explosion and became more and more violent and impatient. For a long time, Langdon did not get a response from his companion. His bloodshot eyes widened, and he turned around and shouted, "Felix, can you teleport me there?" Felix, who was following behind him, held onto his long staff and focused his senses. He shook his head and said, "The changes in the terrain there are very violent, and the aura of the ley line is unstable. There is no way to form a stable ley line node." Damn it! The enraged random could not wait any longer. With a roar, his body once again expanded into a 3-meter-tall little giant. A set of crystal-clear blue armor condensed around his body, and then he plunged into the electric net in a frenzy. Violent electric currents wreaked havoc outside his body, and the blue plasma bubbles gnawed at the ice crystal armor until it was badly damaged. But he covered his face with both hands, and with the constant flow of the power of ice, he resisted the attack of the lightning and strode out of the electric net. In front of him was a broken and twisted passage. The cavern that used to be there no longer existed, only a broken ruin left after a great battle. A huge rock python was lying on the ground, its 30-meter-long body filled with thick, pungent black smoke. The place where the snake's head used to be had been replaced by a pool of fiery red flowing lava. A sparkling earth-yellow crystal core flashed a few times, and finally dimmed. The gnome was crouching near the snake's head, looking for something. "Where are the enemies I asked you to intercept? Where are those two bastards?" Langdon, who had transformed into a small blue giant, roared wildly. "Aren't they over there?" The gnome turned around and pointed. "Huh? Where did they go?" Chapter 82. In the mud, the crocodile hunter moved quickly. Ever since it passed through the lightning trap, the disturbance to the earth elemental energy had disappeared. To save his life, Grimm had to give up on the rock python and let it deal with the terrifying lightning element Quasimagus. He secretly summoned the crocodile hunter and escaped with Mary. Mary was now more like a pile of charcoal that had been dug out from a fire than a person. Her skin had been charred, and the slightest touch would cause countless ashes to fall. After the charcoal was peeled off, the steaming hot flesh and tendons were revealed. It was obvious that the high temperature from the violent electricity had killed most of Mary's bones and flesh. If it were a normal person, they would have died a long time ago. However, Mary was indeed a bloodline acolyte. Her vampire bloodline gave her the strange property of having an indestructible heart core and an indestructible soul. In this mess of charcoal and cooked meat, a weak soul aura could still be felt. AI chip, scan Mary's condition and provide the most reliable treatment plan. Although Grimm's heart was trembling, his tone was still calm and steady. Beep, status scan initiated. Warning, warning, target's flesh is less than 7%, heart core has been damaged. Warning, warning, target's life aura is still deteriorating. If we don't intervene in time, heart core will be destroyed. Don't talk so much nonsense, just tell me the most feasible treatment plan. Grimm interrupted impatiently. Blood, a lot of blood. The target has the constitution of a vampire. As long as there's enough blood, even if her entire body is destroyed, as long as her heart core comes into contact with fresh blood, she can be reborn from it. Blood. Grimm shook his head and scolded himself for being stupid. Mary was a vampire, if not blood, then what could he use to save her? Immediately change directions and find an area with the most abundant subterranean creatures. Quick. Half an hour later, the crocodile hunter's huge body suddenly emerged from the ground at a gathering place of green-skinned gnomes. Green-skinned gnomes were a subspecies that resembled humans, with an average height of 1 meter. Their green skin was as tough as cowhide, and they had a pair of wide ears like a donkey's. Their diet was so wide that it could cover all organic substances. It could be said that in the underground world, apart from rocks and soil, almost everything else was in their diet. Because their individual strength was too weak, they developed the habit of living in group. In the underworld, the green-skinned gnomes were at the bottom of the food chain, but they were the most widespread and numerous. Their biggest characteristic was that they could eat anything, and they were especially good at eating raw food. Logically speaking, such weak creatures didn't deserve to survive, but they could be found in every region of the underworld. The reason for this was very simple. Food was scarce in the underground world, and it was very difficult to find a stable source of food. That was why the green-skinned goblins were like a flock of sheep. Once they couldn't find food to fill their stomachs, they would barge into the green-skinned goblin settlement and eat one or two to fill their stomach. To be honest, the flesh and blood of these green-skinned goblins were sour and tough, and they had a stench that was difficult to get rid of. Therefore, unless they were extremely hungry, the underground creatures were not willing to torture their stomachs. Perhaps this was the main reason why the green-skinned goblins would never go extinct. But today, the green-skinned goblins of this group were out of luck. In a narrow cave, more than 100 green-skinned goblins were gathered in the camp to cook food. The camp was so simple that it was hopeless. Other than the scattered gravel, there were countless holes dug out from the mud. The only tent was just a wooden stick with a piece of cloth that was so dirty that its original color couldn't be seen. And it was this tent that even the vagrants of human society were unwilling to step into, but it was the greatest manifestation of the green-skinned goblin leader's personal status. It should be dinner time for the green-skinned goblins. All the goblins who went out to hunt had returned one after another. They were chattering noisily as they threw the geckos and small insects they brought back into the huge stone pot in the middle of the camp. The bonfire was burning, and the turbid and dirty soup in the stone pot was green. Countless strange objects were tumbling and floating in it. There were bones of unknown origin, pieces of meat with strange colors, sharp magic beast teeth, shelled insects rolling and hissing, and horrifying pale eyes. 2 or 3 green-skinned goblins stood on a high platform, using wooden sticks to stir the stone pot, causing the unknown substances at the bottom of the pot to tumble up. It was this pot of flesh and blood stew filled with poisonous substances, but it was the food that all the green-skinned goblins yearned for the most. Countless goblins gathered around the bonfire with stone bowls in their hands, pushing and shoving each other for a spot in the front row while waiting for the arrival of the leader. As the leader of the goblins, he naturally had the right to enjoy the food first. Thus, amidst the chaos of the demons, the demon crocodile hunter barged in. Grim carried Mary out of the demon crocodile, and looked coldly at the ugly scene in front of him. He said in a low voice, "Kill them all." After saying this, he walked to the side without a care. After finding a slightly cleaner place, Grim gently placed Mary on the ground. With just this slight movement, Mary's pitch-black body was reduced to countless ashes. Grim pulled out a dagger from his waist and stabbed it into Mary's chest without hesitation. Cutting open the half-cooked flesh, Grim did not care about the rising heat waves. He used his hand to pry open the flesh, revealing the dying heart under the chest. This was Mary's heart, as well as her consciousness core. It could be said that as long as the consciousness core was still there, even if the rest of the body was damaged, it could still be reborn through blood. After exposing Mary's heart, Grim did not hesitate to cut his wrist. As soon as the dripping blood fell on the shriveled heart, it brought a trace of vitality. The originally yellowish-white withered flesh instantly turned bright red. Tiny blood vessels spread out from the flesh like branches, growing and extending crazily. They quickly formed a thin layer of blood membrane that wrapped around the heart. As Grim's blood continued to drip, the membrane continued to extend outwards, extending the tentacle-like blood vessels to the surrounding parts of Mary's body. At a speed visible to the naked eye, Mary's heart returned to normal. Blood continued to drip. Every drop of blood that fell on the heart would be absorbed into it in the shortest time possible. Finally, with a soft thud, Mary's heart began to beat again. "Blood, I want more blood." Mary's charred lips split open, revealing the dark red flesh underneath. Mary's thirsty cries could be heard from her mouth. His blood was far from enough. "Still not done?" Grim growled in a low voice. At this time, the gnome camp was already in a bloody mess. The demon crocodile had skillfully used an earthquake spell to collapse the entrance of the cave. It was swaying its huge body and wantonly slaughtering the green-skinned monsters with its earth spears. The aborigine centipede had separated from the demon crocodile and was striding to Grim's side. The long earth spears in its hands were pierced by two green-skinned gnomes. With a light swipe of its hand, a pit half a meter deep appeared. The aborigine centipede tore apart the bodies of the gnomes and threw them to the edge of the pit. As large amounts of blue blood gushed out from the broken bodies of the gnomes, the bottom of the pit gradually became wet and muddy. The demon crocodile was in charge of the slaughter, while the aborigine was in charge of letting out the blood. It only took a few minutes for the pit to be filled with blue blood. At this moment, there was a tall pile of corpses at the edge of the pit. Strangely shaped corpses of gnomes could be seen everywhere. Grim carefully moved Mary's slightly recovered body into the blood pool. As Mary's body was swallowed by the blue blood, the bubbling sound caused the blood pool to boil. The water level of the blood pool began to drop. "Hurry up, we need more blood." Under Grim's urging, more goblins were thrown to the side of the pond. The flowing blue blood converged into a blood spring that continuously flowed into the pond. Only then was Mary able to replenish the goblins' energy consumption. After a quarter of an hour there was a soft splash. Blood splattered everywhere and the blue blood surged. A naked and perfect female body flew out of the blood pool and floated in the air. Mary, who had just resurrected, was clearly a little confused. Her green eyes suddenly opened and blankly looked around. A layer of sparkling and translucent luster flowed on her delicate and fair skin. Her delicate body was exquisite and translucent, charming and alluring. After blinking her eyes and thinking for a moment, Mary finally regained her memories. You're Grim?" "I'm Mary." In just a few seconds, the old Mary had returned. "Damn it, why did you use such filthy blood to resurrect me? Bastard, don't you know that I hate the blood of these lowly creatures the most?" Before Grim could greet her, Mary sniffed her body and started to complain in a shrill voice. Well, Grim had to admit that he did not know much about the vampires. especially the terrifying combination of a vampire and a woman. It was a mysterious species that was hard to fathom. Welcome back. Thank you. Grimm stepped forward and bowed with sincerity. His words also contained 2 layers of meaning, and only the 2 of them could fully understand the meaning behind it. In the previous battle, if Mary did not have to protect the fragile Grimm, she could have easily broken through the lightning trap with minimal damage. However, she chose to protect Grimm with all her might, which caused her to suffer even more serious injuries. Even her mind core was on the verge of shattering. If Grimm did not feel touched by this, then he would really be a stone man with a heart of stone. However, as an acolyte who needed to be calm and emotionless at all times, he preferred to hide his feelings deep in his heart and only take them out when he was lonely. Chapter 83. In response to Grimm's gratitude, Mary was dismissive. Following her soft snort, the remaining blood in the blood pool surged upwards and transformed into a beautiful and gorgeous red dress that wrapped around her body. However, just as Grimm recalled the crocodile and was about to return to the wizard tower, Mary, who had just recovered, suddenly turned her head and stared at a certain direction with her green eyes. What's that?" Grimm was slightly startled. He followed her gaze and saw a yellow and green rock that was 1 meter in diameter in the middle of the camp. A rock. Grimm looked around. The whole camp was filled with scattered sand and pebbles. He had never seen a large rock. Now that a rock had suddenly appeared around the only tattered tent in the middle of the camp, it was indeed strange and abrupt. Grimm had been focused on saving Mary, so he did not pay much attention to his surroundings. Now that he sensed something strange, he used his elemental sight. Under his elemental sight, which could see through all elements of the plane, Grimm's handsome face twitched. "Damn, how is this a rock?" It's clearly Grimm, who had been deceived by the enemy due to his carelessness, snapped his fingers in anger. The earthen Grimm immediately strode towards the rock. Obviously, it knew that it had been exposed. Before the earthen Grimm's spear could reach it, the rock disintegrated. In fact, it did not disintegrate. A green-skinned goblin that was only 1 meter tall took off his cloak and revealed his true appearance. "Spare me, my lord. Great sorcerer, spare my life. Please spare the cabby beast. It's fine even if the cabby beast is willing to be your slave. Please don't kill my Kirby." As soon as the green-skinned goblin revealed his true appearance, he fell to the ground and kowtowed, as if he was pounding garlic with his head. Wait a minute." Grimm stopped the earthen Grimm. "You can actually speak the human language? How can low-level creatures like goblins have intelligence?" "My lord, my Kirby is not an ordinary goblin. Cabby beasts were the smartest goblins in the world. They could serve you tea and rice, make your bed, and even guard your door. The cabby beast is the most capable." As soon as he heard that the young devil in front of him was actually interested in him, the green-skinned goblin immediately worked hard to promote himself. "What was that move you used just now? If this lord's eyes were sharp, I would have almost been deceived by you. That's the disguise and transformation spells that I secretly learned. Please excuse me, my lord." "You know witchcraft?" Grimm's expression became even more shocked. "You actually know 2 types of witchcraft." "I actually know 3 types of witchcraft." The goblin who called himself Cabby stammered. "3? What's the other one?" Grimm felt like the world was spinning. A little green-skinned gnome could master 3 witchcraft, and he seemed to have only mastered 4 until now. No, that flame spear was just a variant of flame arrow witchcraft. Therefore, in all honesty, he had only mastered 3 spells. Not knowing the complicated thoughts in the young apprentice's mind, the cabby beast lowered its head and said softly in embarrassment, I also know an invisibility spell." Grimm was completely speechless. A green-skinned gnome that was regarded as the weakest monster in the continent also had intelligence and mastered 3 witchcraft. What was this invisibility spell disguise spell, transformation spell. An expert in hiding. If not for Grimm's elemental vision and Mary's ability to detect its life force, this little guy called Cabby Beast might have been able to escape today's calamity. Grimm muttered to himself as he rubbed his chin. Just as he was considering how to deal with this strange goblin that was rarely seen in 100 years, the Cabby Beast was clearly frightened by his expression. It hurriedly pointed to the heavens and drew the earth, revealing an even greater inside story. "My lord, please don't kill Cabby Beast. Cabby Beast knows the secret treasure of a wizard. Cabby Beast can take you there." If there was anything else that could move Grimm today, it would be this sentence. Grimm's eyes narrowed, and he gritted his teeth and said coldly, "It seems that you are a magic servant that escaped from a wizard tower. Tell me, which wizard tower did you escape from?" He was suddenly enlightened. How could a gnome in the wild suddenly awaken basic intelligence, and even if it did, how could it come into contact with the mysterious and profound knowledge of witchcraft? Therefore, combining these clues, Grimm dared to conclude that this must be a magic servant that accidentally escaped from a wizard tower. Moreover, it was a magic servant that belonged to an official wizard. That Cabby Beast hesitated for a long time, its small and nimble eyeballs spinning around in its eye socket. However, the sharp spear of the native devil was pressing down on its shoulder, and it had no chance of escaping. Perhaps feeling that there was no hope if it didn't confess, the Cabby Beast finally said a name dejectedly. "Blissful City. Lord Wizard Prydica." Prydica of Blissful City? This name sounds so unfamiliar. "Grimm, have you heard of him?" Mary asked with a puzzled expression. Grimm's face was cold as he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. "Mary, you really should go to the library more often. Understanding the enemy is the best way to protect ourselves. Is this Prydica very famous?" "Of course he's famous. That's because this Prydica is a rank 2 magus." Grimm spat out the last sentence word by word. Hearing this, Mary sucked in a breath of cold air. Even though Mary was usually unbridled and unbridled, there was still a limit to her arrogance and despotism. When facing an official magus, she would not be as reckless as she usually was. Instead, she would sincerely offer her respect. This was because she knew that this was a terrifying existence that could kill her with a flip of his hand. As for a rank 2 magus, that was a terrifying existence that even official magi would tremble in fear when facing. Mary and Grimm looked at each other and instantly understood each other's intentions. This Cabby Beast must be in their hands. My goodness, this was a little gnome that had once served a rank 2 magus. Any bit of magic knowledge or special information they could dig out from its mouth would be enough for the two of them to drink to their heart's content. As for the magus treasure that the Cabby Beast kept mentioning, the two of them had forgotten about it after hearing it and did not care about it at all. Did he really think they were fools? Would such a terrifying rank 2 magus reveal the secret of his treasure to a green-skinned gnome? This was simply a mockery of the great Magi's wisdom and knowledge. This Cabby Beast had probably treated the waste that the Magi casually threw away as a treasure. Grimm climbed up the magic crocodile with endless conjectures. He carried Mary and the Cabby Beast gnome before diving underground once again. Inside the broken tunnel, 3 figures of different heights crouched in front of the collapsed remains of the giant rock python, silently inspecting everything in front of them. The broken crystal core that had lost its elemental fluorescence was raised high in the hands of the quasi-wizard Felix, who was turning it around and examining it. "How is it? What did you see?" The short quasi-wizard Hegel yawned and asked impatiently, "You've been looking for half an hour, haven't you found anything out of the ordinary? This is an elemental crystal core taken from the body of a quasi-wizard earth giant spirit." Felix thought for a long time and gave his opinion in a deep voice. "Nonsense. Everyone can see that. If that's all we need, we wouldn't need an earth element master like you to come out and comment." Hegel's tone was somewhat unfriendly. Langdon, on the other hand, stood silently to the side, his eyes cold. Clearly, he was still angry at the enemy for escaping. There are a total of 14 special runic arrays etched on it. Most of them are runic arrays for absorbing and storing earth energy, while the rest cover life bestowing, elemental summoning, willpower imprinting, and elemental tempering, among other aspects. All of these independent rune circles are then linked together through a special method, forming a new three-dimensional spell formation. That's why this rock python was able to display such shocking might and actually tie down a quasi-shaman to the point that he couldn't escape. Hearing the sarcasm in Langdon's tone, the short Hegel was instantly enraged. "Damn it, how can you blame me for this? You only told me to stand guard here and stop a senior apprentice and a beginner apprentice from leaving, but you didn't tell me that he had such a big thing in his hands. Hey, Felix, with your knowledge of witchcraft, is it reasonable for a beginner apprentice to be able to control a quasi-wizard puppet?" "Humph, he's already an intermediate apprentice now." Alright. Even if he's an intermediate apprentice, this isn't normal, right? There's nothing abnormal about it. If he could find a master alchemist to properly utilize the power of the crystal core, the spiritual cost he had to pay would be greatly reduced. It's not that unbelievable for a beginner apprentice to control a quasi-wizard puppet. It's just that with his spiritual power, it's difficult for him to fully utilize the puppet's power. Langdon coldly listened to the conversation between the two and finally spoke. What if these puppets were made by Grimm himself? Felix was stunned. He shook his head and sighed. Then he must be an alchemy genius that only appears once in 100 years. Otherwise, I can't think of any other way to utilize an elemental crystal core to such an extent. As for whether it's true or not, we'll find out next time. He'll come back to the underground eventually, and we'll know when we catch him." Hegel nonchalantly interrupted, "That's right, Langdon. Because I accepted your request, mine number 7 was unlucky enough to be looted by those bastards from the surface. I'm afraid you'll have to pay for the losses. I hope that when Wizard Perner asks about it, you'll be able to appease his anger." Hearing Hegel's words, Langdon's handsome face twisted again. Chapter 84. Half a day later, Grimm and Mary finally returned to the Wizard Tower. Only then did they know that their compulsory mission team had lost another member, Sheila, and the rest of the members were also injured. The team had suffered heavy losses. The cause of all this was the sudden appearance of 4 fallen quasi-wizards. After the sudden attack, Sabrina and the other 2 quasi-wizards fought against 3 of them, but the remaining fallen quasi-wizard still managed to kill Sheila and the other 3 and force them to flee. Sheila died on the way to escape. Since the fallen quasi-sorcerers claimed that they were here to seek revenge on Grimm and Mary after they returned to the surface, the members of the team who were still in shock pushed all the blame to the 2 of them. Several senior apprentices had asked them to take responsibility for Sheila's death and take full responsibility for the failure of the mission. When Wizard Angus, who was here to evaluate and receive the mission items, appeared in the hall, Isaac was jumping up and down even more. "Sir Wizard, it's them. They insisted on leaving the team and caused the 4 quasi-wizards to retaliate, which caused our mission to fail completely. You must punish them." The remaining Leandra and Bruce also cursed loudly, looking indignant. As for the 2 male quasi-wizards in the team, they all had a pale face and did not say a word. Although they would not do anything to hurt others, it was obvious that they were also dissatisfied with Grimm and Mary. Due to the difference in level, they had suffered countless losses in the fair battle with the fallen quasi-wizards, and all of them had escaped with injuries. The only one in the whole team who could escape unscathed was probably Sabrina. He. Wizard Angus sneered, "You don't have to play these tricks in front of me. Every year, there are many apprentice teams who come to the trial and have internal conflict. I don't care about your little tricks. I only care about what you brought back to the Wizard Tower." Everyone looked at Sabrina at the same time. Sabrina, whose expression was hard to read, opened her hands and handed over the 4 mission items she had. It could be seen that only one of the 4 mission items had been lit up. Only one mission item was completed? Where's the other one? Wizard Angus's face instantly turned cold. It's here. Mary stepped forward and opened her palm. Over there, a lit-up mission item came into view. You've only completed 2 out of the 5 missions. According to our agreement, you'll be exempted from the punishment for failing the mission, but don't even think about the reward. Hearing that they could be exempted from the punishment, the high-ranked apprentices in the team couldn't help but relax. However, what Wizard Angus said next shocked them. In addition, I will announce an internal decision of the Wizard Tower Committee. In view of Grimm and Mary's good performance during the elite mission in the training camp, the committee has decided to transfer the 2 of them to the training camp. From now on, they will no longer have to participate in the compulsory missions. Although Wizard Angus's voice was deep and hoarse, in the ears of the team members, it was no less than a bolt from the blue. In an instant, a few of them were shocked out of their wits. How can this be? Isaac shouted in horror, My lord, this is unreasonable. Our team only has 8 people left. If you transfer 2 of them away, how are we going to complete the mission? We want to protest. Before he could finish, a black chain suddenly flew out of thin air and tied Isaac up tightly in an instant. What? There's someone here who dares to question the authority of the Wizard Tower Committee? Kid, let me tell you, no matter what, do not directly challenge the authority and dignity of a wizard. This is to teach you a lesson. Next time, I won't be in the mood to let you go so easily. Following Wizard Angus's cold warning, the black chain suddenly turned red. In an instant, it turned into a scorching hot metal chain, burning Isaac's skin and flesh until it sizzled. When Angus's tone gradually turned high-pitched, the metal chain began to tighten. The red-hot chain had completely sunk into Isaac's flesh, squeezing his bones until they started to creak. Isaac's magic resistance seemed to have suddenly disappeared. He had no way to resist Wizard Angus's fire chain punishment. After a few screams, Isaac fainted from the intense pain. With a snap of his fingers, the fire chain disappeared just as suddenly as it had appeared. Wizard Angus's torch-like eyes swept across everyone. Everyone in the team lowered their heads in pain, not daring to look straight at him. This is a small punishment for you. The purpose of you coming here is to train your strength and complete the mission, not to shirk responsibility and cause internal strife. If you're not strong enough to crush those black bastards, then learn to be smarter. Use your schemes and unity to defeat the enemy and successfully complete the mission. Not enough people? Then go to the hall on the first floor and recruit. You can see if there are any idiots who are willing to be hired by you. After finishing his rare long speech, Angus turned his gaze to Grimm. Kid, I heard that you're quite good at hiding your strength. Haha, it seems like you also know that keeping a low profile is the most important thing to protect yourself. However, hiding too much is not a good thing. A strong person should have the temperament and dignity of a strong person. If you had shown your strength earlier, maybe this team would have become your underling, and the women in the team would have become your exclusive property. Isn't this more interesting than keeping a low profile? Come on, let me see what you've gotten this time. Ugh. It seemed like this Wizard Angus was not a quiet guy even when he was an acolyte. Grimm cursed angrily as he and Mary took out the spoils of war from this trip. 2 people, 2 heads of fallen acolytes, both of which were advanced acolytes. The faces of the team members who had been watching from the side turned extremely ugly. Only Wizard Angus laughed out loud with satisfaction. Not bad, not bad. You've gone underground twice and brought back 2 heads. It's indeed the most suitable talent for spells in the dark underground cave. Kid, you have a bright future. I have high hopes for you. Tell me, what reward do you want to exchange these heads for? Grimm was filled with resentment after narrowly escaping death in this underground trip. A rock python that he had just obtained was destroyed in the hands of the enemy. This was undoubtedly a huge blow to him. An elemental crystal core with life energy. It's best if it's an earth element, a quasi-wizard. Grim clenched his teeth. He no longer wanted to hide his talent in making puppets. After all, the appearance of the rock python was enough for people to guess what was going on. If he continued to hide his strength, he might not be so lucky in his next trip to the underground. 2 human heads. You can exchange them for 2 quasi-magus level earth magic cores, here. Angus grabbed the 2 human heads and put them into a basin-sized space crack that suddenly opened in front of him. He then took out 2 glowing earth magic cores and threw them to Grim, then turned around and left. After the main character left, the rest of the team looked at each other with an awkward expression. Grim nodded at Sabrina and pulled Mary back to their residence. Grim and Mary were deeply aware of their own shortcomings during this trip to the underground world. Therefore, in the following period of time, the 2 of them were busy with their own things, desperately trying to make up for their shortcomings. What Grim could do now was to eat and drink well every day to build up his body's foundation. Then, he would take a bottle of concentration potion every 3 days to try his best to improve his mental strength. As for the 2 quasi-wizard earth element crystal cores, they were quickly turned into 2 rock python magic puppets. Mary, on the other hand, was deeply aware of her lack of attack power and resistance. Therefore, she spent a large amount of magic crystals to purchase a pair of cruel claws to increase her attack power. This pair of cruel sharp claws was divided into the left and right hand. It was a pair of close-range attack tools. The left hand had the additional effect of tearing, while the right hand had the additional effect of bleeding, which complemented Mary's attribute. If Mary infused her blood energy into the gloves during a battle, she would gain an additional +2 sharpness effect. Mary also spent a lot of time and effort on increasing her magic resistance. If she were to train her magic resistance now, it would take too long, so Mary mainly bought some small accessories to increase her magic resistance. For example, if she had a lightning resistance necklace with +2 lightning resistance on her, she wouldn't have ended up in such a pitiful state of being barbecued. This time, Grim gave all of his magic crystal cards to Mary. She waved her magic crystals and bought a large number of resistance accessories and witchcraft potions in one go. While Mary was squandering her magical crystals, Grim was having a warm and friendly conversation with the cabbie beast in his residence. At this moment, the Kabir still had the appearance of a green-skinned gnome. The only change was that there was a magic collar with faint runes around its neck. This magic collar was a special tool used to imprison subspecies that didn't listen to orders. There was a circle of witchcraft runes etched on the inside of the magic collar. Through 3 thin needles pierced into the target's neck, it slowly absorbed the target's mana to maintain its operation. Any damage to the magic collar would trigger a strong lightning attack, and if the target was too far away from the spellcaster, it would trigger the same effect. The only way to remove the collar was for the spellcaster to activate the witchcraft incantation in a specific order. That was why Grim put the magic collar on the Kabir as soon as he returned. Only then did he feel relieved. Chapter 85. This was an extremely well-behaved little fellow that was extremely good at reading people's minds. As soon as it entered Grim's room, it quickly began to do the chores it was supposed to do. It cleaned the room, arranged the books, ink, and quills on the desk, cleaned the traces of spells, and helped Grim take off the thick traveler's cloak. All in all, he completed all the tasks that a magic servant could do in a short period of time. Then, he bowed his head and waited respectfully by the desk, waiting for Grim's orders. Grim watched with a smile as the cabbie beast finished all of this before calmly giving his orders. "Tell me about Lord Pridika." The green-skinned goblin's body trembled slightly. It secretly raised its head to peek at the young acolyte, but it met Grim's ice-cold and steady gaze. This clearly frightened it, and it hurriedly lowered its eyelids, stammering as it spoke. The situation was similar to what Grim had expected. The green-skinned goblin named Kabir was indeed a lucky runaway slave, and a very lucky one at that. If he wanted to tell the whole story, he would have to start from 15 years ago. To put it simply, Pridika, a rank 2 magus, had captured a large number of subterranean creatures for some sort of soul experiment and used them as experimental materials for his spells. Like most magic experiments, this soul experiment was dangerous and difficult to control, so most of the experimental materials died in agony. Only this green-skinned goblin was lucky enough to survive. Regarding the so-called soul experiment, this Kirby didn't have much of a memory left behind, and it wasn't complete either. However, through its simple description, Grim had reason to suspect that the rank 2 Magus Pridika was attempting to transfer souls. Soul transfer experiments were a necessary part of immortality experiments, so it was something that most magi who dreamed of eternal life would research in private. As for the Magus treasure that the Kirby spoke of, it was just one of the many underground laboratories that Magus Pridika had opened up. Because the Kirby unexpectedly awakened intelligence during the soul experiment and smoothly survived, Magus Pridika promoted it to a personal servant in order to make it easier to observe the changes in its soul. He also passed on some magic knowledge with great interest. It was during this period that Kirby learned those 3 spells. Even though the copy beasts only had basic intelligence, they had their own unique little trick. The reason why he chose these 3 spells was to make it easier for him to escape. Although it was not as intelligent and knowledgeable as a wizard, it knew that as an experimental subject, it could not escape the fate of being cut into pieces on the operating table sooner or later. Therefore, from the day it awakened its wisdom, it had been preparing to escape at all times. But after listening to Kirby's story, even Grim could not help but suspect that it was a lucky fellow who was favored by the world's will. After living with the wizard for 11 years, it had finally found an opportunity to escape. 5 years ago, during an underground purge, the Scattered Tower Forest Wizard Association sent a large group of wizards to raid Elysium City. Wizard Pridika was forced to bring most of the fallen wizards to move deeper underground, while the Cabby Beast was abandoned in the laboratory. According to normal logic, this Cabby Beast would definitely disappear along with Blissful City's self-destruction. Who knew that this lucky fellow would be so lucky, actually escaping before the city was destroyed? Thus, without anyone knowing, the Cabby Beast once again became a wild monster that roamed the underground world. As for what happened afterwards, it was easy to speculate. Although the Cabby Beast, who had mastered a set of strange spells, did not have much fighting strength, it was not something ordinary underground creatures could capture. Thus, after roaming for a period of time, the Cabby Beast used its abilities to gather a large group of its kind, setting up a camp on the shallow surface of the ground, and became the leader of the green-skinned gnomes. After listening to the Cabby Beast's story, Grim could not help but sigh inwardly. This was simply an inspirational story from another world. Unfortunately, no matter how beautiful or bizarre the story was, it could not move him. Grim angrily snapped his fingers, and the thin needle in his collar pierced into the Cabby Beast's neck immediately sent a powerful electric current into its body. In the next moment, the Cabby Beast's body emitted black smoke, and it fell to the ground, twitching endlessly. "Humph, your story is very beautiful and pleasant to listen to. But tell me, what is the benefit of me going through so much trouble to save you? Is it just to listen to your bizarre and twisted *T story?" Grim roared at the enraged Grim, looking as if he was going to skin him alive in the next moment. Master, I can give you a grade 2 wizard's witchcraft lab." The Cabby Beast was indeed a tough cockroach. Even though it had been electrocuted to the point that its eyes and mouth were crooked, it still managed to say something that could save its life. "Where's the laboratory?" "It's in Blissful City. F*ck, you damned gnome. Do you think an acolyte from the surface like me can casually enter Blissful City, a place where depraved magi gather? Do you want to have a taste of electric shock? Master, I'm talking about the ruins of Blissful City, not the current Blissful City. The cabby beast was scared half to death by Grim, and its words were practically roaring. Tell me in detail. I don't know the specifics, but the only thing I know is that Blissful City has been destroyed 3 times. Every time magi from the surface charged into the gloomy crypt, Blissful City would be destroyed once, and the depraved magi would choose another place to build a new city. That's why the Blissful City I'm talking about is the ruins of Blissful City that was destroyed in the flames of war, and the current Blissful City was built after that. After experiencing the self-destruction, is there anything left in the ruins? Grim asked, feigning disdain. My lord, the laboratory that Magus Pridika set up was protected by the tightest spell formation. Even though it couldn't be preserved completely, there are definitely some resources left behind. Even if the amount of resources left behind by a rank 2 Magus isn't much, it's still worth the risk. Grim calmed down. AI chip, analyze the veracity of this cabby beast's words. Beep. Analysis of data completed. Preliminary judgment, veracity. Reference materials. Gloomy crypt events, secrets of subterranean creatures, biographies of depraved magi. Additional note, when this creature mentioned the laboratory ruins, abnormal spiritual undulations appeared. Preliminary judgment is that there is something it needs inside. It could also be an opportunity for it to escape from someone else's control. Grim added in his mind. Of course, all of this was a secret that only existed in Grim's mind. On the surface, he was all smiles as he helped the cabby beast up. He even swore that as long as it brought him to the laboratory that might exist, he would definitely give it its freedom and give it a large amount of magic crystals. In order to win over this new subordinate, Grim even ordered 3 meals a day for the nobles for him. Hence, while Grim excitedly enjoyed his magic energy meal, the cabby beast squatted in a corner of the room and wolfed down its food to its heart's content. After both sides reached an agreement, the cabby beast became Grim's servant with unswerving loyalty. And the first thing he did after he took office was to be thrown into the bathroom by Grim to scrub him. In the subterranean world, resources were rare and precious, and the green-skinned goblins did not have the habit of bathing. Hence, the stench on its body was unbearable for Grim. In order to get rid of the stench, Grim even bought a bottle of deodorant and washed the cabby beast from head to toe, inside and out. After doing all this, the cabby beast stood in front of Grim once more. It actually looked a little like the cute green-skinned monster from his previous world. Alright, now show me what you've got. Master, which one do you want to see first? It's probably a disguise spell. The cabby beast took out an old wooden stick from its waist and chanted an incantation before tapping it on its body. With a magical glow, the color of the cabby beast's skin became the same as the floor. When it crouched in the corner of the room, it was easy to miss it if one did not look closely. What about the partial transformation spell? Hearing Grim's words, the cabby beast's ears stood erect and gradually twisted into a withered branch. Although it was not flawless, it was still very convincing, making it difficult to tell the real from the fake. Yes. Grim nodded. What about the invisibility spell? The cabby beast shook its body and got rid of all the abnormal changes on its body. With a low murmur, the wooden stick flashed, and its body suddenly became illusory and hazy. 5 seconds later, it completely disappeared. Grim tilted his head to observe. Without elemental vision, if the cabby beast's limbs were a little lighter, the effect of the invisibility spell would be very good. Take 2 steps and let me see. A line of wet water suddenly appeared on the floor. The cabby beast had just bathed, and this was the remaining water stain on its body. As it moved, Grim faintly saw an abnormal refraction of light. but as it stopped moving, this abnormal phenomenon disappeared. Here, take this book. Grim randomly picked up a book and handed it to the cabby beast. At first, the book just floated alone in the air, looking extremely out of place. But after 5 seconds of stillness, even the book gradually began to blur and finally disappeared in midair. Oh? You can make yourself invisible with external objects? Are there any restrictions on these foreign objects? Grim asked curiously. First of all, they can't be living things. Secondly, they can't be more than 1/5 of my size. The cabby beast's answer did not exceed Grim's expectations. A spell with such an obvious effect must have extremely strict requirements. Chapter 86. The most orthodox path in front of Grim was undoubtedly to deepen his understanding of magic spells that were related to his affinity with the fire element. Only these things could help him break through to become a magus in the future. Meanwhile, the demon puppet refinement that was of the greatest help to him right now was no less than a crooked path, and belonged to the deviated content. The relationship between them was similar to the relationship between Tao and spells in his previous life. Tao was the path that he had chosen for himself, and it was also the ultimate goal that he was destined to pursue for the rest of his life. Spells were just a method to achieve a small goal, and they were only supplementary method. Although Grim had only mastered a few fire element spells, and they were not powerful enough to deal with his current enemies, it was still Grim's Tao. If he did not want to go astray on the path of a magus in the future, Grim had to spend a lot of time immersing himself in it, working hard to understand the characteristics and laws of the fire element. Only then could he be considered to have grasped his Tao. As for the magic puppet, it might be able to make Grim surpass his peers in a short period of time, giving him unlimited glory with its power. However, it was just a method, and his Tao was not compatible. He could use them to fight for power or to fight for resources, but if he wanted to successfully become a magus in the future, he could not abandon the research of fire element spells. For others, it was difficult to balance the path of Tao and spells, and they could only choose one. However, Grim did not have any objections. After all, with the help of the AI chip, the most time-consuming part of magic research could be done by the AI chip. All he needed to do was wait for the essence of the knowledge to be extracted and integrated into his own path of magic. That was why the difference between Tao and spells was not so obvious when it came to Grim. Now that Grim's power of the will had reached the level of an intermediate apprentice, he could solidify 6 spell models in his spiritual sea. However, only 4 of them had been successfully solidified: Burning Hand, Flame Arrow, Flame Spear, and Flame Shield. As such, it was difficult for him to decide which direction to go with his research on fire element spells. Currently, Grim had his eyes on 2 spells: Body of Flame and Molten Ball. Body of Flame could allow Grim's body to contain more fire element and greatly increase his fire resistance. It was also a necessary path for him to modify the fire element. However, in order to master this spell, apart from constant research on fire element spells, he also needed to study body structure and mutation. As the name suggested, Molten Ball condensed a large amount of fire element and earth element together to form a huge fireball with a diameter of 1 meter. When the fireball flew, it could cause of earth element damage and cause a knockback effect. Once it was detonated, it would cause a large amount of fire element damage. Thus, it could be considered a dual damage area spell. Molten Flame was a spell that could deal damage with earth element. If one was a spell, it of his would of the magus of him. However, if Grim wanted of him, he could mag off fire of spells of the fire, would be of fire element and fire element of fire of the element. In of his of mega, he would of magic element of the of fire element of the of his of element was, to his future. If he had a good foundation, it would be of great help to him in the future. Grimm only hesitated for a moment before firmly choosing the body of flame. If it was any other acolyte, they would have to consider the present as well as the future. Body of flame could improve one's affinity with the fire element and increase one's fire resistance. However, it did not improve the quality of a battle between acolytes. If an acolyte died in a battle with an enemy of the same rank, there would be no future for them. The correct path of magic was there, but in order to survive in the endless battles, many acolytes had to give up on their future and choose to strengthen their combat abilities. However, this problem did not exist for Grimm. Due to the existence of the AI chip, the creation of puppets, which were difficult for others to grasp and master, was a walk in the park for Grimm. With the protection of the many puppets, he did not have to worry about the threat of his enemies and could optimize his path of magic to his heart's content. Since he had decided to learn Body of Flame, Grimm had no choice but to go to the Wizard Tower's library and buy some basic knowledge on body structure and mutation. Fortunately, these were only basic knowledge of necromancy and could be bought with magic crystals. If it involved more advanced spiritual mutation and elemental energy, Grimm would have to visit an official necromancer to collect the relevant knowledge. While he was busy, Kirby respectfully held the books his master had bought with both hands and followed behind Grimm like a loyal servant. Although the sorcerer apprentices passing by were puzzled by the appearance of a green-skinned gnome in the Sorcerer Tower, when they saw the glittering golden collar on the cabby beast's neck, they understood its identity. Some acolytes would enslave magical beasts or monsters to make up for their lack of magic. However, most of them were powerful creatures such as nightmares, rock tortoises, scarlet flame tigers, giant eagles, and earth elves. It was rare to see a green-skinned gnome as a servant. As a former servant of a Tier 2 magus, Kabir had seen much of the world. Not only did he not show any fear, but he even took the initiative to bargain for Grimm, looking like he was a loyal servant. He even took the initiative to haggle for Grimm, taking pleasure in doing so. After experiencing this a few times, Grimm was surprised to find that not only did Kirby have a good grasp of the market, it was also very eloquent. It had the potential to become an unscrupulous merchant. After this discovery, Grimm decided to let go of the responsibility. Whenever he needed something, he would just give Kirby a list of items and give it his magic crystal card, letting it be in charge of the purchase. Grimm locked himself in his room and spent his days studying the sorcery knowledge that the AI chip had given him. In order to increase its enthusiasm, Grimm even made an agreement with Kirby. Everything he needed would be paid according to the market price, and the discount that Kirby obtained after bargaining would be its personal reward. With this incentive policy, the Kirby, who had never had his own personal belongings, went crazy in an instant. He immediately became the greatest profiteer in the Magus Tower, spending all day with a group of beginner acolytes, hanging out with them. But it had to be said that this cabby beast really did have its own unique understanding and talent when it came to the changes in the prices of goods. It bought low and sold high, hoarded goods, and drove up prices. These complicated business methods that only humans could grasp were actually learned by it in just a few days. Moreover, it was doing very well and was in full swing. Soon, all the beginner acolytes on the first floor knew about this gnome merchant called Kirby. Not only was it extremely shrewd, it also had some special items that normal people could not get their hands on. This only served to further accentuate its mysteriousness and strangeness. It could not be helped. The two degenerates that Grimm and Mary had killed were both high-grade acolytes. Their equipment and magic tools were not something that beginner acolytes could get their hands on. Therefore, when Grimm handed all these things over to Kirby, he felt even more confident. That's right. Ever since it made a name for itself in the apprentice market on the first floor, it used the magic crystals it earned to buy itself a new set of equipment. An exquisite and gorgeous magic robe, and a full set of glittering magic equipment. Although most of them were low-quality goods for beginner acolytes to try out, A complete set was enough to dazzle the eyes of outsiders. Coupled with the exquisite magic staff and the magic cloak that trailed behind it, whenever it appeared in the apprentice market, it would cause a small wave of greetings. In order to match its style, this fellow even removed the word beast from its name and called itself Kirby, looking very much like a big merchant. The reason why many beginner acolytes chased after it was because of the grade 3 and 4 magic items that it could bring out every few days. These items were not exquisite magic tools that regular acolytes could get their hands on. During this period, there were of course market enforcers who came to collect them. However, when Kirby secretly revealed his master's name, the fellow called Rain could only leave with his tail between his legs. Obviously, Rain was aware of Grimm's glory in the training camp through his family. As long as Kirby did not go overboard, he did not want his family to offend an elite acolyte who was rising rapidly. However, regular acolytes naturally did not know about this. On the contrary, Rain's unusual actions made the acolytes even more curious. They all tried to find out who the person behind Kirby was, but no one knew. Therefore, a rumor suddenly appeared in private that this green-skinned goblin called Kirby was the servant of an official magus. Thus, with the help of these strange rumors, business in front of Kirby's stall became more and more popular. Grimm, who knew nothing about all this, locked himself in his residence and seriously thought about his future path. Since he had decided to study the body of flame first, there would not be a qualitative improvement in his sorcery power in the short term. If he wanted to maintain his advantage in the Dark Crypt, he would have to fully explore the battle potential of the Crocodile Hunter. As a mount, the Crocodile Hunter's outstanding ability to move through the soil allowed Grimm to establish an advantageous position. However, its lack of attack power was still its shortcoming. The Crocodile Hunter was more than enough to deal with an intermediate acolyte, but it was somewhat lacking in strength against a senior acolyte. When it faced a quasi-wizard, its overly loose body structure made it almost vulnerable. At this time, the appearance of the Rock Python Hunter made up for Grimm's lack of attack power. A quasi-wizard Rock Python might not be able to fight against a nimble quasi-wizard, but what about 2? What about 3? Chapter 87. After a period of trial and error, Grimm had vaguely discovered a few ways to use the magic puppet. The magic Crocodile Hunter was a high-grade magic puppet. Every time it was used, it would take up 2 points of spiritual force. This would last as long as the magic puppet was active. On the other hand, a quasi-magus-ranked magic puppet like the Rock Python would take up 3 points of spiritual force. This meant that if Grimm fought with all his might, he could only maintain 1 magic Crocodile Hunter and 2 Rock Pythons at the same time with his 11 points of spiritual force, Noble Headband +1. After all, he still needed to conserve some spiritual force for casting spells. This was after the AI chip's precise calculations and special spell formations had greatly reduced the amount of spiritual force a magic puppet required from the main body to achieve the optimal configuration. If it was a regular magic puppet, Grimm's spiritual force would only be able to maintain 1 Rock Python at most. One of the main reasons for this was due to the demon puppet's characteristic. Magic puppets were different from ordinary golems. Golems were humanoid puppets that had been created using large amounts of precious resources. Due to their huge bodies, there was enough space to carve all sorts of runes and special spell formations on the surface of the golem. Puppets created in this way would naturally have the least amount of spiritual force required to control them. Most of the time, the controller would only need to give the simplest command to the golem, and they would not have to worry about it at all. However, magic puppets were different. Magic puppets did not have a fixed body before they were summoned. Their appearance was similar to a magic summon, but the target of the summon was not a random creature from another world, but a fixed magic puppet. This was also the main reason why magic puppets needed to consume Grimm's spiritual force. Furthermore, magic puppets didn't have the enormous bodies of golems that the creators could use as they pleased. Therefore, to carve sufficient control spell formations and energy systems in the narrow space of an elemental crystal core that was as small as an egg or a pigeon's egg, it was simply an extremely harsh torture for the creator's puppet-making ability. Truth be told, it was already an astonishing achievement for Grimm to be able to create such a powerful rock python puppet with the help of the AI chip. Combining their battle prowess, a golem with a special body was undoubtedly much stronger than a temporarily summoned magic puppet. However, from the beginning to the end, Grimm had only created magic puppets and never used the golems. The main reason was that the golems were too big and took up too much space, so they were not easy to carry around. Take the lowest grade clay golem as an example. A clay golem without any magic equipment would weigh 600 pounds, 600 kilograms, and it would stand 8 feet tall. Such a huge clay golem was powerful, but how could Grimm bring it into the battlefield? One had to know that such a big guy was difficult to fold and carry even when not in combat. Moreover, their enormous weight consumed a great deal of magic energy. Thus, it was impossible for them to rely solely on absorbing the drifting magical elements in space to supply their needs in battle. Therefore, golems with fixed bodies could only exist as guardians of wizard towers or magic facilities. They usually stayed motionless in secret spaces to minimize their own magic consumption. When they were needed to fight, the preset warning mechanism would activate them and release them to repel or annihilate the invaders. All of this required the support of the huge energy reserves within the Magus Tower. Therefore, these characteristics determined that Grimm could only rely on his magic puppets to fight. After all, carrying an egg-sized crystal core was much more convenient and hidden than carrying an earth-shaking alchemy puppet everywhere he went. Therefore, in order to maximize the support of his magic puppets, Grimm continued to explore the potential of the magic puppets in battle. At the same time, he worked hard to improve his spiritual force. After all, his spiritual force was related to the number of magic puppets he could use in future battles. Therefore, on the 4th day after safely returning to the Wizard Tower, Grimm worked hard to increase his vitality to 382 and once again took a spirit concentration potion. This time, Grimm's spiritual force increased by 0.70 points, which was a lot less than the 0.75 points he got last time. Continuous use of the same type of magic potion would cause the effect to become weaker and weaker until it was completely ineffective on the target. This was a phenomenon that wizards had long studied, but they could not do anything about it. The main reason for all this was the existence of resistance. When the same type of magic potion was used continuously, it would accumulate in the body, which was difficult to get rid of, and reduce the effect of the same type of magic potion. Although this process was gradual, it was real. Therefore, after taking the spirit concentration potion, Grimm's basic stats were as follows: Strength 4, 12, Agility 4, 35, Vitality 3, 17, Spiritual Force. Compared to the last time, Grimm's spiritual force had increased by 1.07 points. 0.70 points came from the spirit concentration potion, while the other 0.37 points came from the continuous mana meal and daily meditation. Based on preliminary calculations, this increase of 1.07 points was worth around 350 to 400 magic crystals. This made Grimm completely believe that a successful wizard apprentice was indeed built by piles of magic crystals. It was noon. After a hard morning of selling goods, the most successful goblin merchant in the Wizard Tower, Cabby, walked briskly back to his residence. Ever since he made his first bucket of gold from Grimm, Cabby rented a room next to his master's residence as his nest. Every day, he only needed to report to his master about the results of the day, and then he could live a carefree life. He could sleep until he woke up naturally, and count money until his hands cramped. To be honest, this kind of comfortable life was the perfect life it had always dreamed of. However, this dream did not come true when he was with the Grade 2 wizard, nor when he roamed the underground. However, due to a strange combination of factors, he realized it after following a wizard apprentice. These days, he was simply crazy and he was busy all day. During the day, he would spend his time in the apprentice market, using his eloquence and talent to earn a steady stream of magic crystals. After stuffing himself with delicious food that night, he nestled in his simple and crude nest and counted the magical crystals he earned during the day over and over again. It could be said that every night he would hug a pile of magic crystals and sleep sweetly. However, the intelligent cabbie also understood that the one who gave him all this was the mysterious master behind him. Without the mysterious master's financial support and full authority, a green-skinned goblin like cabbie who was looked down upon by the other wizard apprentices would not have the right to order around. Don't be fooled by the fact that the apprentices surrounded him every day, whispering sweet nothings, but deep in their eyes, cabbie could still see the unconcealable contempt and disdain. They didn't respect him, but the mysterious master behind him. A clever gnome, no matter how talented he was, if he didn't have a strong master to back him up, the only ending for him was to be trampled on the ground, branded as a slave on his face, and thrown into a dark and damp dungeon. He would have to eat human food scraps all day long while doing hard and tiring work. The reason why cabbie knew all this was because before he was chosen as an experiment subject by the wizard, he lived such a life. Comparing the two, although his current master was not as powerful as the previous one, ever since he fell into such a lifestyle, he never had the thought of escaping. There were even many times when he kept fantasizing about how great it would be if he could maintain such a lifestyle forever. With endless daydreams, cabbie used the rune token and the secret spell runes on his waist to open the door to his room. However, as soon as he stepped into the room, he was hit by a thick stench of blood and staggered. In just one morning, its residents had turned into a bloody and terrifying slaughterhouse. His beloved mysterious master was standing in front of a bloody dissection table, examining a strange body that had been completely dissected with a serious expression. Just by looking at the dissection knife in his hand, the deerskin gloves stained with blood, and the white robe that was splattered with blood, one could tell that he was busy with an autopsy. It seemed that his master was also a novice in the field of biological anatomy. Although he had never dissected a creature himself, after staying in a rank 2 wizard's laboratory for a long time, cabbie had been imperceptibly influenced by what he saw and heard. His knowledge of biological structure and anatomy was far greater than Grimm's. If it had been a skilled necromancy apprentice, he would not have turned a dissection exercise into such a bloody mess. What parts to cut and how to avoid the creature's blood vessels were the basics of a necromancy apprentice. It was impossible for him to make such a mess. That was why cabbie was certain that this was his master's first time dissecting a living creature. As his master's loyal servant, how could he ignore his master's awkwardness? Cabbie moved a small wooden stool over and climbed onto it to help his master. He even moved the lizardman's body with his own hands to make it easier for his master's scalpel to cut it. Unknowingly, cabbie had turned into an instructor with good knowledge of witchcraft and began to guide Grimm in his first dissection exercise. Of course, the instructor was patient and the scholar was serious, so neither of them realized that there was anything wrong with this. Thus, with cabbie's help, Grimm successfully completed his first dissection exercise. Grimm took off his deerskin gloves in satisfaction and threw them into the dustbin beside the operating table along with his white robe. Only then did green-skinned goblin cabbie realize that he had overstepped his bounds. He hurriedly jumped off the wooden stool and squatted by the side, waiting for his master's punishment. "You've done well today. Looks like you've learned quite a bit from that rank 2 wizard. I'll be relying on you to help me with my anatomy and structure exercises from now on." Grim smiled warmly. "Get up. Do you think that I will punish you for a little vanity when you have done nothing wrong? All right, tidy up this place, it's time for lunch." Grim casually threw away the miscellaneous items in his hands and returned to his residence, leaving behind a dumbfounded cabbie. Looking at the bloody slaughterhouse behind him and inhaling the pungent smell of blood, Cabby finally understood why his master did not place the dissection table in his room. He was afraid that it would affect his appetite. Chapter 88. The underground world had been very chaotic lately. This was the message that Kevin had passed on to Grim when he visited him. Of course, Kevin's visit this time was not just to tell him this, but to bring along the head deacon of the Lothar Trading Company. Their target was the blood garnets that Grim and Mary had gotten from the No. 7 mine. After a few days of appraisal, Grim had determined that these blood garnets were a special kind of magic material. They were mainly used to refine some special wizard tools, and they were not helpful for the magic puppets he needed. Perhaps it was because of this that Grim straightforwardly entrusted the 6 blood garnets in their hands to the Lothar Trading Company to deal with. As for the cost, Grim did not choose magic crystals. Instead, he asked the head deacon to convert all the cost into quasi-wizard-level elemental crystal cores. Regarding this point, the chief deacon readily agreed with a smile on his face. Since the head deacon was willing to give away the 6 blood garnets, he had already completed half of his share of resources for this half a year. Moreover, the head deacon did not accept magic crystals and was willing to convert them into elemental crystal cores. This meant that he had successfully negotiated 2 deals, so how could he not be happy? The reason why Grim was so happy was because he had learned that the person behind the Lothar Trading Company was Wizard Angus, who they had been dealing with for a long time. Kevin the Black Hand also belonged to the same family as Wizard Angus, the Byron family. It was because of these 2 factors that Grim did not hesitate to agree to the head deacon's request. It could also be considered as him getting on Wizard Angus' good side. In return, Kevin became even more enthusiastic towards Grim. He secretly told him that if he had any problems that he could not solve, he could choose to visit Wizard Angus. Whether it was the purchase of knowledge or the exchange of resources, Wizard Angus would give him the biggest discount. Therefore, in less than half a day, the quasi-wizard level elemental crystal cores that Grim needed were delivered to him. There were a total of 4 elemental crystal cores, 1 earth, 2 water, and 1 wind. In addition, there was also a general map of the underground world that had been explored in the Dark Crypt. However, considering the changes in the underground, this map was only for reference. It was very difficult to completely match the actual terrain. Grim now understood that for a long time in the future, the only thing that could help him establish an advantage in battle was the large number of devil puppets. The advantages of magic puppets lay in their convenience, concealment, and large numbers. If the situation allowed it, Grim even wanted to build an army of devil puppets that he could command at will. In the future, if he didn't like anyone, he wouldn't even need to do anything himself. With a glance, the demonic puppets would be able to drown the enemy. Of course, such fantasies could only be realized in the distant future. But now, he could only carefully build his own demon puppet squad. That's right, Grim already had a preliminary idea. He would use the various combinations of magic puppets to fully exploit the full power of each type of magic puppet. Recently, he had spent most of his time in the underworld, so he might as well create more earth element mana puppets. But considering the possible changes on the battlefield in the future, he needed to make more preparations. Water and wind were the preparations he had made for the future. Especially the wind element mana puppet. With it, Grim would have a free-flying pet, and he would no longer have to worry about the long journey. He used the AI chip to scan these elemental crystal cores and let the AI chip tailor-made the most suitable mana puppet design for them. Once everything was carried out in an orderly manner, Grimm picked up the crystal ball and silently examined the information and data within. Within the black curtain, the only thing that could be lit up was the thin layer above. Even the shallowest layer was made up of many twisting and turning tunnels, cracks, secret passages, rifts, and waterways. Countless caves, karst caves, and caverns were dotted here, as many as the stars in the sky. There were as many paths that could be passed between any two locations, though most of them could not be passed by humans. On this map, the space that could be temporarily sheltered was marked in green, and the roads that could be passed through were marked in blue. Amidst the dense and complicated blue and green, there were specks of red light. These were the approximate distribution of underground creatures, races, and monsters that had been discovered. Of course, in this shallow three-dimensional map of the gloomy region, Grimm could not find any signs related to the ruins of Blissful City. Because of this, Grimm called Cabby over and asked him to point out the location of the so-called Magus treasure on the map. After studying it carefully for a long time, Cabby finally pointed out an area. Grimm did not see any signs related to the city, but he saw a large patch of red light that warned of danger. Some areas in the subterranean world had dangerous forbidden areas that outsiders did not dare to enter. Usually, acolytes would not be able to withstand the harsh natural environment there, or there would be some extremely terrifying monsters. No matter which one it was, acolytes would have to be careful around dangerous areas. Grimm looked at the glaring red light on the map, and could not help but hesitate. From the glaring red light, it was a forbidden area that even quasi-magi would be in danger if they entered. Hence, Cabby did not hesitate to point out this place. Theoretically speaking, there was a reason. Since ancient times, magi liked to build various types of laboratories in their residences. From Cabby's description, it could be seen that the Grade 2 Magus was also an expert in modifying creatures. Once the laboratory was abandoned, the mutated creatures, modified creatures, puppet creatures, or magic energy stored inside could cause irreversible damage to the area. It would be fine if the mutated creatures or modified creatures died, but if a powerful one survived, it would be no less terrifying than a magus to the acolytes who came to explore. Although Cabby claimed to have grasped some of the secret spells of the secret chamber, the risks involved still made Grimm hesitate. However, just as Grimm was hesitating, Cabby revealed some information that once again strengthened his resolve to give it a try. The Flaming Lord's Scepter. In one of the secret rooms of the Grade 2 Magus, there was actually a Flaming Lord's Scepter. To others, this Flaming Lord's Scepter was only a powerful tool that could summon 3 quasi-magi every day. However, to Grimm, it had another indescribable special use. With Grimm's affinity with the fire element, he could use the Flaming Lord's Scepter to create a portal to the fire elemental plane and obtain a steady stream of fire elemental cores. Once his strength reached a certain level, he could even try to occupy a territory in the fire elemental plane and become a true Lord of the Flames. Putting everything else aside, most of the elemental cores that Grimm had been collecting recently did not come from this plane, but from other elemental planes. The space of the multiverse was huge and deep, filled with various forms of elemental energy, forming a boundless ocean of energy. The many planes were like islands, floating in the ocean of energy in isolation. Every plane was a complete miniature world, with land, mountains, rivers, oceans, skies, and living creatures. Not a single thing was missing. However, as the elemental energy mixed into each plane became unbalanced, the plane itself would also show completely different characteristics of the plane. The plane where the sorcerer world was located was a large plane that was extremely suitable for the survival of living creatures. However, when the control of the plane was grasped in the hands of the rapidly rising sorcerers, the characteristics of the plane had also shifted, leaning towards the chaotic and powerful witchcraft energy. The elemental planes mentioned just now were regions where a single element gathered when they were being nurtured. As such, when these planes grew, they would become single elemental planes. In ordinary material planes, elemental matter was almost balanced. Earth elemental matter gathered together to form the earth, then mountains, hills, plains, and other different landforms. Water elemental matter gathered together to form streams, lakes, rivers, and even oceans. Wind elemental matter brought clouds, rain, thunder, and lightning to the material plane, while fire elemental matter brought lava, volcanoes, and life to the material plane. Only when these elements were combined together would they be able to construct a perfect material world where the heavens and the earth grew and everything flourished. However, the elemental planes were not like this. For example, the fire elemental plane that Grimm yearned for the most had mountains, hills, oceans, and lakes. However, the basic elements that formed them were all fire elemental particles. Over there, the mountains were burning, the oceans were burning, and even the sky was burning. Of course, such a world was not suitable for most living creatures to live in, but it could give birth to fire-type creatures that used fire origin energy as their source of life. Fire spirits, fire giants, lava hounds, fire spirits, fire hawks, molten giants, fire demons, fire elders, flame lords, and flame monarchs. Just like humans, it was a world of fire elemental creatures, and there was a clear hierarchy of power. If Grimm really wanted to achieve something in the field of fire, the fire elemental plane was a large plane that he had to step into sooner or later. At the end of the day, the sorcerer world was just a large plane, and the sorcerers were aggressive by nature. They loved to search for new material planes in the endless sea of stars, then invade and conquer them, and drag them onto the sorcerer world's ever-expanding plane chariot. However, with the cruel and ruthless personalities of the sorcerers, they had long obtained the coordinates to the elemental plane, but no sorcerer had ever dreamed of conquering the elemental plane and turning it into a subsidiary plane of the sorcerer world. The reason for this was that these elemental planes were all terrifyingly huge planes. In terms of power, if the sorcerer world really connected to the elemental plane, the ones who would be the happiest would be the elemental creatures that had no desires. At that time, it would not be the sorcerers happily dividing the resources of the elemental plane, but the countless elemental creatures that would flood into the sorcerer world and expand it into a new elemental plane. Chapter 89. Although there was no way to verify the existence of the Magus's treasure, it was definitely worth the risk. After all, something that a Grade 2 Magus might not be interested in could be a priceless treasure for Grimm, who was struggling to become a Magus. Therefore, after confirming the location of the blissful city ruins, Grimm began to think about how to get there. From the location shown on the map, the possible location was at the deepest part of the shallow layer of the gloomy crypt. It was less than 17 miles away from the surface, but it was deep in the heart of the rich underground creatures. According to the information on the map, there were several large underground tribes near the suspected location, and there were also many powerful underground creatures roaming around. If he really wanted to explore there, he would only end up as food for those evil and cruel fellows if he did not make thorough preparations. In the past few days, Mary had been busy increasing her strength. She was so busy that her feet barely touched the ground. When Grimm took the opportunity to reveal his plan to Mary, she did not impulsively ask to team up with him. Instead, she calmly told Grimm that she had recently found a way to increase her strength and was working hard on it. It was impossible for her to go out in the near future. Therefore, Grimm naturally handed over control of Kirby to Mary and put her in charge of keeping a close eye on this cunning kid, while he prepared the resources needed for the underground exploration. After everything was ready, Grimm found Kevin and told him that he was going to the underground world to look for some gloomy grass. He then used this as an excuse to sneak into the gloomy crypt. To be honest, the gloomy crypt was not a suitable place for sightseeing. Any sane creature that stepped into the gloomy crypt for the first time would feel extremely depressed. Once they thought about the possibility of thousands of tons of soil and gravel burying them, they would not be able to remain calm like before. In the gloomy crypt, any irrational actions could expose their whereabouts and attract groups of predators. Grim had gone all out for this underground trip. Apart from the crocodile hunter he was riding, he also had 3 quasi-magus level rock python devil mantises in his pouch. If he really encountered an enemy that he couldn't defeat, he would just have to risk his life and release all 3 rock pythons. He didn't believe that there would be any enemy that could stop him from escaping. As for the other 2 water and 2 wind crystal cores, Grim was still in the process of refining their spell formations. He would probably have a result after this trip to the underground world. Once they entered the range of the dark crypt, Grim summoned the demon crocodile hunter and sank into the soil, following the direction indicated on the map as they advanced deeper into the ground. Every once in a while, Grim would control the crocodile to emerge from a dark tunnel to confirm the direction he was heading in. Using this method, it only took Grim a little more than 3 hours to reach a depth of about 10 kilometers. But as he went deeper, his speed became extremely slow. Large chunks of metal ores and huge rock formations formed an insurmountable obstacle for Grim to overcome as he moved through the mud. In the dark soil, Grim's mental power could only extend to a distance of 10 to 20 meters. It was extremely difficult for him to find a path that led to his destination in such a situation. After running into a wall many times, Grim had no choice but to emerge from another tunnel. It couldn't be helped. In a completely unfamiliar area like this, it was better to use the ready-made tunnels dug by the underground creatures than to randomly run around in the dark. In the dark and damp tunnel, Grim took out his crystal ball and used the locator spell to confirm his location. Then, he slowly walked down the tunnel. Grim was sitting on the back of the demon crocodile, wearing a thick and tough traveler's cloak. He had a noble's head ring on his forehead, and his eyes were hidden behind a pair of strange gnome goggles. Through the dim light vision and the elemental vision that allowed him to see through the source of matter, the tunnel in front of him was a completely different and strange world. The background color of the entire field of view was green. The lighting was slightly dim, but everything could still be seen very clearly. Everything that had the aura of an element would emit a unique elemental halo in his vision. Even if they were hiding behind thick stalagmites or in the cracks of the rock walls, they might be able to hide their figures, but the colorful elemental halo could not be hidden. Based on the strength of the halo in his elemental vision, Grim could determine the strength of the creatures even from a distance. The demon crocodile hunters would attack the weaker ones. With a few mud spears, the hidden creatures would be pierced through and killed instantly. Bright red blood flowed out from their broken bodies, and soon, their last breath of life was gone. When he encountered the stronger ones, Grim would summon his rock python and use its incomparably tough body to crush them into minced meat. Along the way, the scattered underground predators had encountered a monster killer. Before their prey could even approach, they would die mysteriously in their hiding spots. However, the scattered predators were easy to deal with, but the underground tribes that were entrenched in groups at the mountain passes that they had to pass through were difficult to deal with. For example, the tunnels of the gnolls and the lizardmen's lair were places that even Grim did not dare to provoke. Otherwise, if they came out in full force, even if he could defeat them, all the monsters in this area would be alarmed. However, Grim did not know that just as he silently snuck through the tunnels of the gnolls, in the dark and damp shadows that he had just passed through, a hunched and thin figure stood up. It was an old gnoll who had entered the final stages of his life. His skinny body did not have many strong muscles, and an old and simple dark dagger hung at his waist. His hunched old body could no longer be straightened. However, when he squinted his slightly turbid eyes and looked in the direction that Grim had disappeared, a formidable aura spread out, almost causing the air around him to freeze. "Leader, that human is heading towards the ruins." A black shadow suddenly emerged from the darkness. "Let him be. He's just an intermediate acolyte, he can't do much." The old Knoll leader's scarlet eyes lit up like two small flames in the darkness. "If we go any further, we'll be in the lizardmen's territory. These guys have been using their advantage in numbers to stop us from getting close to the ruins. If we let a little bug in, we might be able to cause some trouble for them. Yes, I'll arrange for the brothers at the sentries to let him in." The black shadow bowed and quickly disappeared into the darkness. Grim was still moving slowly in the darkness. He did not know why, but he felt an inexplicable chill down his spine. It was as if a cold wind was penetrating his thick cloak and entering his body, causing him to tremble slightly. Damn it, where did this ominous sign come from? Never before had Grim hated himself for not learning about divination and prophecy. Even if he only learned a little, he could easily predict the direction of danger and make some preventive preparations. Grim had secretly taken out the screaming tree branch to look at it a few times, but he did not find anything strange. This meant that danger was approaching, but it was not directed at him. Could it be that the danger came from within the ruins? Grim was deep in thought as he scanned the endless darkness around him. Logically speaking, with the ability of elemental vision, no elemental user would be able to get close to him without him noticing. In the underground world, apart from the terrifying magical creatures, what other creatures could pose a threat to his life? Grim's mind was racing, and the information of powerful creatures stored in the AI chip flowed through his mind. Suddenly, a few creatures caught Grim's attention. Knoll hunters. Lizardmen assassins. This seemed to be their territory, and these two strange creatures did not belong to the category of monsters. This meant that there was no elemental energy in their bodies. However, in the list of dangerous creatures in the gloomy crypt, they were still at the top. This meant that even if they did not rely on elemental energy, they still had formidable combat abilities. Grim's heart sank. Elemental vision could not detect these creatures that relied on their powerful physical abilities, and it was even more difficult to detect them with glimmer vision. Perhaps even Mary's infrared vision would not be of much use. In that case, how should he discover these strange and troublesome fellows? While Grim was panicking, the AI chip finally gave him some useful information. Full vision matching ability. This was a type of spiritual perception that only Grim could use. Every time he moved forward, Grim would be able to store the information of the terrain in his mind using glimmer vision and elemental vision. With the powerful visual matching ability of the AI chip, he would be able to detect the minute differences between the two maps in the shortest time possible. If there was really a cold-blooded assassin hiding beside Grim, as long as it moved along with Grim, the shadowy space it was in would definitely be slightly different from before. These differences could not be detected by the human eye, but it was difficult to avoid the AI chip's full vision matching ability. As long as he could detect them, the threat of the assassins would be reduced by more than 80%. Chapter 90. In the dark, twisted shadows, the crisscrossing stalagmites, rock peaks, and stone protrusions occupied most of his vision. In the spacious and quiet karst cave, even the slightest sound could travel along the twisting and winding tunnels to a very, very far place. Grim perched on the back of the crocodile hunter, a sharp blue light flashing in his eyes. Although the surroundings were quiet, Grim's instinct for danger was already ringing in his ears. It seemed like a large number of enemies had arrived. With a soft sound, a dazzling red flame shield appeared and began to revolve around Grim's body. The AI chip in Grim's mind was busily performing calculations. Countless real-time images were being compared and matched. The AI chip of the fiery eyes found all the minute differences that were hard to discern with the naked eye and marked them on Grim's retina. Grim turned his head and stared at a low-hanging stalagmite on the left side of his path. The shadow there was much thicker than before. With a light stomp of his foot, the native hunter in front of him raised its hand, and a yellow earthen spear condensed in its hand. With a twist of its waist and a powerful throw from the native hunter, the earthen spear turned into a yellow bolt of lightning and pierced into the shadow. In Grimm's vision, there was nothing there. There were no elemental reactions or signs of life. However, as the earthen spear pierced into the body, there was a sound of flesh being pierced. Poochie*, a muffled sound was followed by a mournful hiss that resounded through the silent cave. The shadows flared up, and a humanoid creature covered in greenish-black scales suddenly appeared. The earthen spear pierced through its chest and nailed it to the stone pillar. Warm blood flowed down the earthen spear. The humanoid creature began to struggle with all its might. The more it struggled, the bigger the wound that was torn by the earthen spear, and the more blood gushed out. Poo. The second earth spear flew through the air and pierced through its head. The humanoid creature immediately stopped moving and hung motionlessly on the stone pillar. Only the crisp sound of blood dripping to the ground could be heard in the cave. The next moment, Grimm raised his head and looked at the dark ceiling. It was 12 to 13 meters above the ground. Even with Grimm's vision, he could only see a blur due to the weak light. However, as the Aborigine hunter hurled 2 earth spears, another skinny and strong humanoid creature fell from above. The 2 spears had pierced through its right chest and left leg, but did not take its life. However, just as it was struggling on the cold floor, the demon crocodile's huge claws suddenly enlarged in front of it. Dong*, the sound of a tomato or watermelon being crushed echoed in the cave. The demon crocodile continued its slow and leisurely advance. When it raised its claw again, the place where the humanoid creature used to be was left with a pile of minced meat that was difficult to identify, race and gender. A sharp whistle suddenly sounded in the darkness. When the whistles resounded through the cave, countless shadows began to rapidly approach Grimm from the darkness in the distance. There seemed to be more than 100 of them. In the darkness, the sound of bowstrings being released did not stop. The sharp sound of arrows piercing through the air came from all directions, and their target was Grimm, who was covered in flames. Oh, get ready for a group fight. Grimm did not dare to be careless. He instantly dispersed the flame shield around his body and sank into the demon crocodile's huge body as if he had sunk into a swamp. Puff puff puff. As soon as Grimm disappeared, the demon crocodile's back where he had been standing was filled with arrows. All the arrowheads flashed with a green light. It was obvious that they were dipped in some unknown poison. The Aborigine hunter that had suffered along with Lin Li was also pierced with arrows, but it did not care at all. It raised its hands above its head and clawed at the air. Every time it did so, an earth elemental spear that was 1.5 meters long was automatically condensed. It even threw its arrows from both sides at the lizardmen hunters who had revealed themselves in the distance. Some were dodged by the hunters and assassins, some exploded on the rocky peaks and stalagmites, and some hit their targets directly, instantly killing them in the shadows. It had to be said that the lizardmen's bodies were too weak and slender. In order not to affect their agility, they did not evolve to have thick, dense scales like those of the larger monsters. Instead, they grew layers of thin, greenish-black scales. As for their purpose, they were only used to prevent the leakage of body heat. This type of evolution allowed them to possess unparalleled stealth abilities in the dark caves, but it also made their defenses weak and vulnerable. No matter which part of their bodies was pierced by the earth spears, it was a fatal wound. Their delicate bodies were not strong enough to withstand such an attack. The poisoned arrows they were used to using were completely useless against a clay sculpture native elemental puppet life form. Left with no choice, the lizardmen hunters pulled out their short daggers and leapt between the rock walls and stalagmites towards the giant demon crocodile that was still advancing. At this moment, the weakness of not having enchanted weapons was obvious. Although the weapons made from special underground metals were unusually sharp, most of them were thin. Such weapons were not enough to break through the demon crocodile's glowing yellow mud armor. Many lizardmen surrounded the demon crocodile and attacked it, cutting the mud armor into pieces. But after a moment, an earthen yellow halo flashed, and the mud armor was restored to its original state. They could not hurt the demon crocodile, but the demon crocodile could hurt them. Although the demon crocodile's attack rate was a little slow, each large area of the earth spears could take away 3 to 5 lizardmen's lives. The demon crocodile was like a giant tank that rumbled forward, while the lizardmen were a group of ignorant natives that wielded bamboo spears and carried bamboo arrows on their back. The difference in strength between the two sides was not just a little, so it was reasonable for them to suffer heavy casualties. Finally, after more than half of the lizardmen had died, a mournful whistle sounded in the distant darkness. With a low roar, the lizardmen began to retreat. When the demon crocodile's surroundings became quiet again, Grimm's body, hidden under a thick cloak, slowly appeared. He hesitated for a moment, but did not order the demon crocodile to chase after the enemies. It was obvious that the underground tribes here had a strong sense of territory. He had probably been attacked by them because he was too close to their habitat. Now that they had suffered such a great loss, it seemed that they would have to retreat to their nests to defend themselves. But just as Grimm ordered the demon crocodile to continue forward, his sharp hearing picked up the mournful cries of the lizardmen in the distance. It was as if a new war had begun in the darkness. However, Grimm did not dare to be interested in it. He stood on the demon crocodile and looked into the distance for a while before continuing his journey. In the darkness, the old knoll leader was hiding behind a stone pillar, looking at Grimm from afar. His gray, sharp, and thin face was filled with an unconcealable look of surprise. Behind it, a group of nimble gnolls leaped through the dark, rugged caves as if they were flying. They pounced on the lizardmen who had just returned after suffering a great defeat. Both sides fought in the darkness of the rocky peaks and stalagmites. The muffled sounds of sharp daggers slicing through throats could be heard continuously. If this sudden attack was successful, perhaps the damned lizardmen tribe would be driven out of this area, and all the benefits in the ruins would belong to the gnolls. However, Gray Ear was still worried about the surface apprentice who suddenly broke into the ruins. He waved his hand, and one of his subordinates appeared from the shadows behind him. "Go, inform Cracked Tooth in Blissful City. Tell him to tell the fallen Magus that someone wants to enter the ruins. Tell him that the Gray Ear tribe could not stop the enemy and suffered heavy losses. The Dark-Scale Lizardmen tribe was exterminated by the enemy." In the darkness, the old gnoll's scarlet eyes shone coldly, and his white fangs made one's heart palpitate. "Yes, your subordinate will go immediately." After bowing slightly, Shadow turned around and disappeared into the boundless darkness. The further he went, the more worried Grimm became. In front of him, behind him, left and right of his body, even above his head and under his feet, the metal content in the rock layer was getting higher and higher, and the soil exposed by the guay fruit was also getting lesser and lesser. This also meant that once he encountered a terrifying enemy here, even he wouldn't be able to escape underground like he did in the past. To him, this was the last piece of bad news that he wanted to hear. But Grimm had to admit that this was indeed a very suitable area for building a city. In the subterranean world, if one wanted to build a city once and for all, other than considering the surrounding biological resources, mineral resources, and water sources, the most important thing to consider was the stability and firmness of the geological structure. It was rare to find a place like this that was surrounded by metal ores and stable rock formations. The presence of mineral resources meant that there would be an endless supply of resources to attract wandering caravans, and the presence of water meant that there would be more lives here. However, these were not as good as having a stable sky. No one would want to be crushed into a meat patty by millions of tons of sand and stones while they were sleeping. That was why Kirby pointed out that this was the ruins of the previous blissful city. Judging from the terrain alone, it made sense. After passing through many habitats of the subterranean races, perhaps they were affected by the defeat of the lizardmen. They gathered in the darkness far away, but they did not impulsively attack. In this dangerous situation, the demon crocodiles finally reached the end of their long journey. Chapter 91. Jungle. There was a jungle underground. The moment he saw the lush forest, Grimm's expression turned sluggish. He first cast a spell to confirm that everything in front of him was not an illusion, but a real underground space. Standing at the entrance of the cave, looking at the vast and lush forest, Grimm smelled a strange and twisted scent. He was standing on a demarcation line. Behind him was a dark, heavy, and hard rock layer with a metallic luster. Beyond the demarcation line was ankle-deep green grass, tall trees and dense vines, rose branches, shrubs, and berries that tightly blocked the road. Through the greenery, Grimm could vaguely see the figures of some small animals running quickly in the forest. In the depths of the forest, the leaves swayed, apes cried, and tigers roared. It was an abnormally flourishing forest. But behind this flourishing forest was a strange energy aura that made Grimm's heart palpitate. It only took Grimm 3 seconds to confirm that this was the ruins of the blissful city that Cabby had described. The source of all this was a large amount of magic energy that leaked out after the Magus Tower was damaged. Every Magus Tower would have an elemental pool as an energy source for magic facilities. But when the Magus Tower was destroyed, the energy would leak out and cause irreversible pollution to the surrounding environment. It was obvious that the strange energy in this area was so dense that it could produce such a huge mutated forest. Yes, this was a mutated forest, not the primitive ones that could be seen everywhere on the surface. Any plant or creature that was infected by such a dense energy aura would grow and mutate rapidly, going against the laws of life and turning into a special species that was completely different from before. That was why the forest in front of him looked normal, but it was all just a disguise. This was already a paradise for magic creatures. Grimm took off the thick and stuffy traveler's cloak and wiped the sweat off his face. He took out a water bag to replenish himself, then slowly and carefully walked into the forest on the back of the magic crocodile. From the moment he stepped into the forest, everything around him was no longer trustworthy. This seemingly beautiful and green enchanted forest was actually much scarier and more dangerous than the dark underground tunnel just now. As for what kind of monsters were waiting for him inside, he didn't know. But since he was already here, no matter what was inside, he had to try. It had to be said that with the support of the 3 quasi-magus level rock python devil puppets, Grimm had become much bolder. It was undoubtedly very difficult to walk in a forest that had not been colonized. Wild grass and flowers, shrubs and bushes, wild rose vines, and branches of trees stretched out horizontally. These things spread without any pattern and twisted together, almost filling all the gaps in front of the tall ancient tree. Without the demon crocodile, Grimm would not have been able to move an inch. But now, with the huge body and powerful physical strength of the demon crocodile, Grimm felt like he had joined a demolition team. He crushed everything in his way and squeezed out a flat road from the impenetrable forest. The wild grass and bushes were crushed into powder by the demon crocodile's huge claws. The tall ancient trees that stood in the way of the demon crocodile were all crushed and broken. For a moment, the ancient trees were broken, the vines snapped, and the sky was filled with colorful leaves. However, behind these ordinary scenes, there were also countless strange scenes that were extremely strange and unusual. Every time the demon crocodile's huge claws crushed a patch of green, there would be countless strange sounds coming from under its claws. It sounded like the cry of a baby, but also like the scream of a strange monster. It was so soft that people almost couldn't hear it. When the demon crocodile lifted its claws, Grimm saw a dozen green sprouts in a pit the size of a millstone. The other wild grass and flowers had all been crushed into a pool of green juice. Only these sprouts survived in the entire space. Not only did they survive, but they also curled up like living creatures, forming rows of saw-like teeth. They tightly wrapped around the demon crocodile's claws and madly bit at them. Under their crazy attacks, mud and dirt kept falling, and the demon crocodile's claws were slightly damaged. In front of the demon crocodile, some tall ancient trees pulled out their roots with difficulty and slowly escaped from the demon crocodile's path. But there were always some strange plants that were not afraid of death and continued to attack the demon crocodile. They looked like sunflowers, but the bright yellow petals at the top of the thin stalk had a woman's face in them. Their attack method was very simple. From the mouth of the woman's face, they kept spitting out sticky and stinky venom. Many of the vines hanging in the forest began to twist madly. At the end of the vines, a terrifying mouth opened up, and the edges were filled with terrifying sharp teeth. If a creature passed by them, they would probably only need to pounce and bite off the creature's head. Grimm's young face showed a look of disgust. The forest was like a giant beast in disguise. When the demon crocodile entered, it immediately triggered all the hidden dangers. If one did not have enough strength and entered this place by mistake, they would probably not even have a corpse left. Imagine, if there was no demon crocodile, perhaps the mutated sprouts hidden in the ordinary green grass would use their leaves to cut the creature's feet, burrow into the creature's body, and enjoy a warm and delicious meal. Those ancient trees that could walk on their own were probably the legendary tree demons. Once they were entangled by their roots, ordinary creatures would only end up with their flesh and blood completely devoured. As for the terrifying plants and the disguised flying serpents, they were just parasites of the tree demons. Although they were not worth mentioning, they had the advantage in numbers. If one were to be entangled by them, it would be extremely troublesome. Grimm raised his head slightly and pointed his finger. A long vine that was hanging down from a tall ancient tree and was about to reach him suddenly burst into flames. In the blazing flames, the vine twisted and struggled violently. The terrifying leaves opened up and let out strange hisses that made people frown. Unfortunately, no matter how crazily it struggled, it could not escape the fate of death. The blazing flames quickly engulfed its body, turning it into ashes that scattered down. Perhaps sensing that the intruder was difficult to deal with, whispers could be heard from the depths of the forest. Countless strange plants began to try their best to escape from the demon crocodile's position. After effectively intimidating these arrogant magical plants, the demon crocodile continued to move forward into the depths of the forest. After they walked for a distance, Grimm turned around and saw that the path they came from was once again blocked by the strange plants that had moved here. It seemed that these magical plants were not willing to let their food slip away and still wanted to devour Grimm's flesh. The next wave of attacks came from the monsters living in the magical forest. Most of the monsters in the natural world were forest beasts. When they absorbed the floating elemental energy in the air, they could evolve into terrifying magical beasts that had the ability to use elemental energy. However, monsters were different from magical beasts. They did not evolve naturally, but were more like monsters that were mutated and polluted by the world. Their species were complicated and their abilities were unimaginable. Until now, there had not been a single wizard who dared to pat his chest and say that he had understood all the types of monsters. It could be said that in every primitive forest, there was a possibility of discovering some new monsters. They were often more terrifying and strange than magical beasts. The first wave of monsters that rushed out of the depths of the forest was a group of mutated coyotes. They had strange dark red calf-like bodies. Most of the hair on their bodies had fallen off, revealing countless hidden abscesses and dark spots. What was even more strange was that they were all two-headed wolves. They had terrifying wolf heads, huge white fangs, green saliva dripping from the corners of their mouths, and a strange fluorescent light lingering in the depths of their mouths. Their movements were strong and vigorous, and their strong bodies were comparable to lions and tigers in the forest. When they rushed out of the forest in groups, chilling wolf howls resounded through the sky. Asterisk puff puff puff, asterisk a series of translucent wind blades and snake-shaped lightning covered the demon crocodile's huge bodies in an instant. Some of these two-headed wolves flew around the periphery, continuously attacking the demon crocodiles with spells. Others howled and rushed to the side of the demon crocodiles, using their sharp claws that were half an inch long and terrifying fangs to attack the mud armor of the demon crocodiles. Grimm's face turned pale. In just one round of attacks, the demon crocodile's mud armor had been largely destroyed. If not for the protection of the native hunters, Grimm would have been directly attacked by the enemies. These two-headed wolves were not very strong, at most having the strength of a mid-level apprentice. However, when hundreds of giant wolves converged into a moving army, even a high-level apprentice like the demon crocodile hunter could not hold them off. Grimm gritted his teeth and lightly tossed out an elemental crystal core. When it landed on the ground, a rock python that was even more terrifying than the demon crocodiles quickly crawled out of the ground. The rock python's thick body was completely made of rock, and its internal cavity was more than 2 meters in diameter. Such a huge creature nimbly rushed into the wolf pack, instantly setting off a wave of blood in the forest. Chapter 92. In the heart of the jungle was a stretch of rugged and steep ruins of the Wizard Tower, piled with rubble and rubble. The Wizard Tower, which once had 7 floors, was now only left with the bottom 3 floors. The collapsed bricks and stone fragments had buried all the entrances. A large number of wildly growing vines and branches crawled all over the ruins, covering the whole place under a patch of green. Even so, wisps of pale green smoke were still coming out from the pile of rubble, and the magical plants here were much thicker and stronger than the ones in the outskirts. Asterisk dong dong dong. Asterisk heavy footsteps came from the end of the street. As a giant crocodile-like creature approached, the green vines that covered the city streets and houses were retreating, revealing traces of human life in the past. Along with the continuous sounds of houses collapsing, an even thicker rock python crushed the remaining houses along the way and slithered over. On its body, there were traces of green acid corrosion, scorch marks caused by lightning, cuts caused by wind blades, and scorch marks caused by raging flames. All these marks were still vivid in his mind, fully demonstrating the hardships and horrors of this 5-kilometer forest road. If not for the AI chip's refinement spell formation on the core of the Earth Elemental Puppet after mastering the basic knowledge of puppet creation, allowing the loose Earth elements to condense into hard and dense rock, the demon crocodile hunters would not have been able to kill their way through. It would have been impossible for the crocodile hunters to kill their way through and enter the core area of the Magus Tower ruins. Behind them, there was still an endless stream of magical creatures howling in the forest. But strangely, they seemed to be afraid of the rock python and did not dare to step into the core area of the ruins. Grimm furrowed his brows, and a dark cloud appeared on his handsome face. Those magical creatures were not afraid of death, and would not allow outsiders to destroy the source of magic energy that could give them a huge boost in strength. That was why they did not dare to chase after them, not because they were afraid of him, but Grimm raised his head and looked at the ruins covered in layers of magical plants, his heart skipping a beat. Could it be that there was an even stronger magical creature inside, and that was why the people outside did not dare to enter its territory? Although this was just a guess, Grimm felt that it was the most reasonable answer. Looking at the wisps of pale green smoke, Grimm could not help but understand. It seemed that part of the elemental pool in the destroyed Magus Tower had not completely lost its effectiveness. After so many years, it was still operating tenaciously. It was a pity that the elemental energy it gathered could no longer be stored effectively, so it dispersed into this space and brought about such a huge change. "Go, dig that place for me." Following Grimm's command, the rock serpent swayed its sturdy body and pounced straight towards the collapsed tower. With an explosive sound, a green arrow of light pierced the rock python's forehead. The sudden explosion of green energy quickly corroded the rock python's forehead, leaving behind a fist-sized pit on its forehead. The rock python let out a long and violent hiss as it quickly retracted its body and coiled up in its original spot. Grimm's heart tightened. Following the faint fluorescence left by the green arrow of light in the air, he quickly found the attacker. This was a beautiful woman with a pair of transparent wings of light on her back. Her figure was graceful and graceful. She had short, thick green hair, a petite face, and a pair of dark green eyes. Her body was naked, and only a few key parts of her body were covered with bright and alluring rose branches and green vines, barely concealing her charming and gentle spring scenery. She was currently floating above the collapsed Magus Tower, holding a magic bow with strange patterns in her hand, and glaring at him with a face full of anger. Grimm swallowed a mouthful of saliva. In his elemental vision, the intense green elemental glow blinded him. If he didn't adjust the intensity of the elemental feedback, perhaps he wouldn't even be able to look directly at this beautiful, terrifying, and powerful magical creature. Chip, can you scan the origin and strength of this creature? Beat. Gathering aura collected information as follows: origin of magical creatures. Flower elves 70%, demons 17%, forest fairies 9%. Strength, Magus. Elemental tree, plant. Scan of magic weapon. Green magic bow, able to fire 30 to 40 elemental light arrows. Attack method, single target attack. Also able to fire 8 to 10 elemental light rain. Attack method, yo-yo attack 30 to 50 meters. Scan of magic weapon, rose armor. There are 7 mysterious flower branches growing on it. Each branch can withstand 60 points of physical attack and 40 points of elemental attack. When the attack exceeds the tolerance of the mysterious flower branches, they will be destroyed and disappear. Only when all the branches had disappeared would the main body of the monster bear the brunt of the attack. Note: when the mysterious flower branches are destroyed, one will be restored every 5 minutes. Note: fire particles and negative energy can deal double damage to the target. Hiss, as the data flowed into Grimm's mind, he could not help but let out a cold hiss. This was too terrifying. This was a powerful magical creature that had the strength of a magus. Moreover, judging from her powerful aura, she was probably one of the most powerful monsters even among the monsters, especially when he saw that the magical weapon in her hand had such a powerful area of effect attack. Grimm's mind was in turmoil and he wanted to retreat. Different from the magical weapons made by acolytes, these magical weapons that grew together with the magical creatures were the most powerful weapons. When sorcerer apprentices were refining magic tools, they were also limited by the lack of materials and resources. It was impossible to completely use the things that were most compatible with their own innate attribute. Therefore, the strength of the magic tools they refined was limited, and they also did not have the ability to grow. The magical weapons that appeared on the magical creatures were mostly made by combining parts of their bodies and rare resources. Not only were they powerful, but they could also grow as their strength increased. Comparing the two, it was clear who was stronger and who was weaker. While Grimm was hesitating, the powerful flower spirit in the air suddenly spoke. Kakik. I didn't think that after so long, there would still be an acolyte who dared to come here to die. Little guy, didn't your mentor tell you that there are some places you shouldn't go? However, it's too late for you to regret now. Obediently offer me your flesh and soul. It's been a long time since I've tasted the deliciousness of human flesh. The moment the flower spirit opened its mouth, it revealed a mouthful of sharp teeth that were like saw teeth, fully displaying its terrifying nature as a devil. Ck, a beautiful woman actually has a rough and wild man's voice. In an instant, the last bit of goodwill Grimm had for it vanished into thin air. However, before Grimm could speak to it, the flower spirit whose gender was hard to discern pulled the bowstring with its right hand. Countless green plant energy in the nearby forest quickly gathered on the bowstring. In the next second, thousands of green elemental light arrows rained down like a storm. Grimm's fire shield and the mud armor on the crocodile's body didn't even last 3 seconds before disappearing. If it wasn't for the rock python pouncing over and using its thick body to block Grimm's attack, he would have been turned into a sieve by the green rain of light. Even so, a light arrow still pierced through Grimm's shoulder. The wound was as thick as a finger, and faint green energy was still attached to it, corroding Grimm's flesh. The pain made him sweat profusely. Grimm endured the pain, and a stream of scorching hot flame spurted out from his fingertip, which he then stabbed into his wound. The powerful fire element quickly neutralized the green energy on the wound. Grimm clenched his teeth and poured bottles of potions and ointments on the wound. The dizziness caused by the loss of blood, the weakness caused by the corrosion of the green power, the sharp pain caused by the spontaneous combustion, and the numbness and itchiness caused by the rapid growth of his flesh and blood under the stimulation of the magic medicine. All kinds of strange feelings mixed together and attacked Grimm's heart. Grimm didn't dare to hold back anymore. He crazily threw out the other 2 elemental crystal cores. Following a series of earth-shaking noises, 2 new rock serpents emerged from the ground. Grimm's current spiritual power, and with the +1 boost from the noble headband, his spiritual power could reach 12 points. Summoning a rock serpent required 3 points, and summoning a crocodile hunter required 2 points. With his current spiritual power, he could barely hold on. The crocodile hunter carried Grimm on its back and slowly retreated, while the 3 giant rock serpents pounced on them. They fought against the terrifying flower spirit with their strong bodies and physical attacks. The sky fell, the earth cracked, and the mountains shook. The rock serpents had always been this violent and savage when they fought. Their unscrupulous attacks caused the remnants of the city to be destroyed at an even faster speed. But even so, the 3 powerful rock python devil centipedes couldn't hide the terror of that terrifying flower spirit. Regardless of whether it was a single light arrow or a large area attack, the rock serpent hunter could cause visible damage to the rock serpents. The flower spirit was obviously an agility-type magical creature. It flapped its wings and quickly darted between the 3 rock serpents. No matter how hard the rock serpents tried, they could not touch it at all. Only the large area of sand and stones could cause a lot of damage to it. However, as the rose branches on the flower spirit's body kept blooming, a green light shield emerged and blocked all the physical and energy damage for it. The flower spirit's close combat ability was not weak either. Its slender hands were covered in a layer of green light, and it could easily break the hard rock armor on the rock serpents' bodies, as if the rocks were made of tofu. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.